I have created scientific magic. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 626. The low-dimensional unfolding form of high-dimensional matter. Under Lin's perception, the divine power in his body was disappearing at a very fast speed, and soon it was more than half, and the palm-sized element number 7 in front of him was like a bottomless vortex that seemed to swallow everything. Vittorio and others also looked at Lin nervously. They had studied this strange element before, but the results were not satisfactory. If someone from the outside world had not interrupted in time, Vittorio would have almost been trapped in it. At this moment, Lin's consciousness was like Vittorio's at the beginning. He was trapped in a strange maze of thoughts. His mind was divided into two parts. One part existed in the outside world, and the other part was trapped in the palm-sized element number 7. The surroundings were like a strange maze, with overlapping lenses on all sides. Lin knew very well that this was a unique scene in high-dimensional space, just like a person on a two-dimensional plane looking at a three-dimensional object. As the object continued to move, the cross-section in front of him would continue to change. Fortunately, Lin En, who had already crossed the divine realm, also became a high-dimensional creature. From both the inside and outside perspectives, the appearance of element 7 soon appeared in front of him. This is an irregular hypercube with a diameter of about 15 centimeters. It is as smooth as a round mirror, reflecting the surrounding scenes inside. As the object rotates, it is as dazzling as a kaleidoscope. The divine power infused before is not without effect. Magic power can infiltrate every element they are familiar with. Even microscopic particles are no exception. Even though element 7 is very unique, it cannot avoid the infection of magic power. It's just that the magic power required is too huge. Even if legendary wizards like Herv drain it, they can't control it. After paying nearly 60% of the divine power, Lin En finally gained control of this group of element 7. Although it looks only the size of a palm, its mass is about 100 tons. Unlike the high mass of a neutron star that relies on the close fit between microscopic particles, the terrifying mass of element 7 comes from its simultaneous 4 dimensions. Just like a metal block with a length and width of 1 meter and a thickness of 1 centimeter, its mass is about 78 kilograms. But if its thickness is also increased to 1 meter, the mass will become 7.8 tons. Element 7 has 4 dimensions, which is equivalent to countless three-dimensional substances stacked together, and its mass is naturally very exaggerated. However, the element 7 with a huge mass is constantly changing its appearance like a toy under Lin's manipulation, and is kneaded into various shapes. Speaker Lin, what is the use of this thing? Anthony asked curiously. Lin paused, stopped ravaging the element 7, and immediately explained. This high-dimensional matter can directly affect time and space, and has extremely strong plasticity. For some reason, Lin's mind suddenly popped up the inference that the triangle is the most stable structure. Is it the same for dimensions? Lin En felt that this was very possible, because the high-dimensional form of microscopic particles is usually presented in the form of probability clouds, which is very unstable. However, as countless microscopic particles are fixed together under the trend of strong interaction and appear in front of them in a low-dimensional form, their form becomes more and more fixed. Countless speculations flashed through Lin En's mind quickly. The two properties that were discovered alone are already very useful for technological civilization. This is the key to moving from low dimensions to high dimensions. No wonder element 7 is so favored by geometric civilization. The speakers present were also eagerly discussing the use of this substance. Vittorio quickly put forward a very useful and constructive suggestion. Since this thing can have a direct impact on time and space, can it replace the God power system to provide energy for the curvature engine? Hearing this, more than a dozen speakers suddenly felt their eyes light up. After losing Ella, the god of the moon, as an energy source, the curvature engine they developed became a beautiful decoration and no longer had the ability to fly at superluminal speed. Unless Lin En is willing to serve as the energy source, as the head of the Wizard Council, It is obviously impossible to spend too much energy here. Moreover, a superluminal spaceship can be used for deterrence, but it can't play a decisive role in war. Now if we can use element 7 as a substitute, mass production of superluminal spaceships will become possible. Ahem. Just as everyone was discussing, Prov suddenly coughed twice, drawing everyone's attention back. It's not too late to conduct research on element 7 later. I'm afraid the celebration banquet I asked people to prepare has already begun. Lin En nodded and put away element 7. He was not very interested in this formal banquet, but the alchemists who came back with him needed proper rest and sufficient rewards. This grand celebration banquet was set up in a luxurious exhibition hall, and almost all the people who could attend were great wizards. In just 2 years, with the help of the power of the magic network, the number of great wizards has increased to about 5,000, and the number of legendary wizards has exceeded 20. Lin En also met these new magic network users one by one and got to know them. After the banquet, Lin En could not wait to return to his residence from the Sky Tower and began to conduct a more in-depth study of element 7, such as trying to cut it, break it, or mix it with various elements and particles to observe its characteristics. The first cutting was not very smooth. Lin En tried various methods and finally found that ordinary matter cutting on element 7 was like cutting fluid with a knife. It could only change the shape of this thing, but could not cut it in the true sense. After a lot of trouble, Lin En used divine power to bind and make a quantum knife to barely complete the cutting work, and directly cut out 2 pieces of element 7 with similar volumes. Of course, they only looked the same in volume, but in fact their mass had changed, and they were cut into 2 pieces from another dimension. Then Lin En tried to use magic to stick them together, trying to restore them to their previous form. This was undoubtedly more difficult, and what he had not expected was that an accident happened very abruptly. A palm-sized piece of element 7 suddenly began to expand rapidly, swallowing up everything around it. Not only this room, but also the huge mansion outside, and even the entire street in the royal capital disappeared into the royal capital out of thin air. Chapter 627, Folded Capital and Dimensional Space. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the bell on the top of the Sky Dome Tower in the square of the capital slowly rang, indicating that the day's work was over. Dalit, a worker in the glass workshop, put down his blowpipe and left the factory full of steaming sweat with the rest of his colleagues. Under the light of the street lamps, they walked towards the tavern together. Along the way, a dozen workers kept complaining about the universal literacy policy of the parliament in recent months, which not only reduced their working hours from 11 hours a day to 9 hours, but also reduced their wages by about 20%. Instead, every weekday morning, they had to take a 2-hour basic literacy class, which cost 1 silver coin per month, and they were not allowed to miss it. For Dalit, attending classes was much more uncomfortable than working. Those messy numbers and symbols made him feel dizzy. After studying for several weeks, he still couldn't understand the basic knowledge that the wizards talked about. Fortunately, the night is their own time. They can temporarily forget the scorching heat in the workshop and those headache-inducing formulas and have a few drinks. But today seems to be little Lucy's birthday. Dalit suddenly thought of his daughter and immediately thought about what gift to buy when he passed by the store later. Just as Dalit was thinking about how to surprise his baby daughter, he suddenly bumped into the person in front of him. It was the workers in front of him who stopped abruptly with terrified expressions on their faces. "What's wrong?" Dalit asked in confusion. The streets, houses and so many people just disappeared suddenly. A laborer pointed to the front in fear and stammered, almost doubting whether there was something wrong with his eyes. "How is it possible? Are you tired?" Dalit sneered. "You know, this is the most prosperous area in the capital and the most heavily guarded place in the entire kingdom. I heard from the wizards that even a fly flying in from outside would be detected by the magic barrier covering the capital, so it was extremely safe." However, when Dalit turned his head and looked in the direction pointed by his co-workers, the mocking expression on his face suddenly turned into a look of fear. He was very familiar with this road. He would pass by here every day when going to and from get off work. Dalit clearly remembered that after leaving the workshop, there was an alley where his favorite Blackthorn Tavern was located. Behind it was the big square, which was also the most prosperous place in the capital. But now this alley has disappeared. It was not the kind of disappearance that was emptied, demolished, or destroyed, but it suddenly disappeared, as several workers said. The capital square that was originally across an alley now appeared directly in front of them. If he had not just passed by this street this morning, Dalit would have suspected that he was too old and his memory was wrong. The workers who witnessed the disappearance of the street were so scared that they fell to the ground. The previous second, they were still in front of the familiar streets and alleys, and the next second, they were on the square. Is it an illusion, or magic, or is it that a certain wizard is joking with them? However, Dalit quickly rejected this point, because there were many people in the square, and many people witnessed the disappearance of the street like them. There were even couples who walked into the streets, and the other ones stayed in the square, watching their partner disappear in front of them, and now they were looking for him like crazy. The parliament's reaction was undoubtedly quick. Within just 20 seconds of the riot, wizards in golden and red robes rushed over from all directions to block and isolate the place. After a rough understanding of what happened, Sanchez, who had just arrived, felt a chill in his heart. The area of hundreds of meters disappeared directly, and as a legendary wizard, he could not detect any clues, and even the magic barrier covering and monitoring the capital did not have any warning. After hesitating for a moment, Sanchez asked someone to try to pass through this area, and the result was very smooth, and there was no disappearance. Sanchez frowned and walked to the middle of the city square and the industrial zone. He opened his domain but did not gain anything. Everything in front of him was so harmonious. If he had not remembered the planning of the capital, he would have begun to doubt whether the street really existed, as if the engineers of the capital had designed it this way from the beginning. This should be some kind of magic designed to the dimension. Sanchez immediately thought of this. "Mr. Speaker, I suspect that this matter may be related to that person," a great wizard hurriedly reminded him. Sanchez nodded. Of course, he did not forget that Lin En's residence was nearby, and the other party had just returned today and such a thing happened. If it was just a coincidence, he would definitely not believe it. Only God can do such incredible things. But generally speaking, if the magic star wants to do something in the capital, he should warn in advance. But now there is no news. This made Sanchez feel a little uneasy. Just as he was about to send someone to notify her and others, he saw dozens of streams of light flying from a distance. It seems that there is no need for this, but it is also true that such a big mistake has appeared in the core of the capital, and no one can sit still. On the other side, in the streets of the capital that disappeared inexplicably, a carpenter who had just come out of the tavern and was about to go home saw the bright blackthorn sign again after walking for a while. He was stunned for a moment and began to wonder if he had drunk too much. Otherwise, how could there be two blackthorn taverns in the capital? As time went by, more and more kingdom citizens in the street had discovered something wrong. In the past, this street was only a few hundred meters long and the end could be seen at a glance, but this time it was different. No matter how you walked, you couldn't get out of this street, as if you were trapped in a weird maze. Lin En, who was also in the street, had left his mansion and was suspended in the sky, staring at the gradually chaotic scene below. He didn't expect that his mess would actually strip the entire area away and form an independent space. It was like folding a corner of a paper page in half, forming two areas inside and outside the page. For low-dimensional beings, this part of the folded space disappeared in front of them, as if it had never existed. Chapter 628, Low-Dimensional Expansion. Mastering the Secrets of Time and Space. Seeing the chaos in the capital due to the inexplicable disappearance of streets, Lin En did not mean to warn them. He just used psychic magic to comfort the kingdom's citizens who were constantly wandering in the streets and almost going crazy, telling them not to worry too much. As for the capital, the parliament had been at peace for a long time and was a little careless. A whole street disappeared directly, and it took until the civilians discovered the problem and reported it step by step to find out the clues. This made Lin En very dissatisfied, so he regarded this incident as a small test and immediately focused on dealing with this unexpected incident. The influence of Element 7 on time and space exceeded his expectations, or this substance and magic produced some kind of strange reaction. and it actually directly peeled off an area of hundreds of meters in radius. Lin En looked up at the sky, and the bright moon had disappeared, because the inside and outside had become independent spaces with their own cycles, and even light could not be transmitted in. However, according to his guess, the three-dimensional coordinates of this area have not changed at all, only the position of the fourth dimension has changed. What is needed now is to return the four-dimensional coordinates of this street to their original positions first, and then find a way to remove this coverage. After thinking of a method, Lin En immediately began to experiment. He had successfully used magic to infiltrate the seventh element before, so he naturally knew that the part of the seventh element that disappeared was not really gone. It was like a sphere that wrapped the entire area, but because it was too big, he could not see it with his naked eyes. Outside the sphere, there was a vast void. No, it cannot be said to be void, because Lin En could clearly sense that the huge quantum tide was constantly surging. The density of energy rose and fell, and countless microscopic particles would disappear or suddenly appear in the void at every moment. Lin En couldn't help but guess that perhaps these disappeared particles would set off a strong cosmic storm somewhere. While pondering, Lin En was not idle either, and began to control the seventh element to wrap the entire street and move in the void, moving closer to the four-dimensional coordinates where the eternal star was located. Fortunately, it was his divine domain, and he could confirm the distance and direction of both sides at any time, which saved him a lot of energy. The whole process went smoothly, and it lasted about an hour before and after the street returned to its original position. The next question was how to restore the form of element 7 to its previous state. This was not an easy task, because the change of element 7 just now was completely accidental. This time, Lin En spent more than 3 hours to find the trick, which was somewhat similar to the magic he developed, Klein bottle, and Mobius strip. The element 7 covering the entire area began to shrink gradually, folded together in an incomprehensible and strange way, and finally restored to a palm-sized sphere, suspended in Lin En's palm. It is hard to imagine that this thing with a diameter of only a few dozen centimeters can cover an area of hundreds of meters after changing its form. In the attempt just now, Lin En found that this was far from the limit that element 7 could reach. If he wanted, he could extend it hundreds of times. Low-dimensional expansion? Such a word emerged in Lin En's mind. This concept was proposed by the scientific researchers who studied dimensions and time and space in the previous life of the Federation. As a relatively cutting-edge scientific fantasy, it was recorded in the intelligent brain. There are many similar experiments. For example, a scientific master with extremely high authority in the field of dimensions, in order to break the barriers between dimensions, applied for the Federation's still experimental superparticle compression device, and compressed a piece of matter with a volume of 1 mm into a plane with a thickness of 0.1 nanometers. Its area was extended by tens of millions of times, but he did not have the authority to view the final result. But he knew that it happened. Countless complicated thoughts flashed through Lin En's mind, and the noise and shouting below had also been heard. The whole street suddenly disappeared and suddenly returned, making the kingdom's people feel scared while being confused. And others were relieved. They tried various methods outside but to no avail. Obviously, such a situation was completely beyond their ability to cope with. Lin En put away the element number 7 again, and appeared on the street in one step. The wizards gathered nearby quickly surrounded him. "Are you okay, Speaker Lin En? What happened just now?" Raphael asked hurriedly. Lin En had been out of contact for more than 2 hours, which scared them. After all, the Wizard Council seemed to be developing well now, but Raphael knew very well that all deterrence was based on Lin En, the only true god. If something went wrong, they would not be able to deal with the geometric civilization and the threats from the main world with their own strength. The system of the magic network would collapse, which would definitely be a disaster. "I'm fine, I just had a small problem when I was experimenting with element number 7, Lin En explained briefly, and then continued to ask, "By the way, how long has it been on the eternal star since this street disappeared?" Although Raphael didn't understand why Lin En suddenly asked this, he still told the truth. "It's about 2 hours and 15 minutes in total, Since the first to discover the abnormality were civilians in the capital, they had to report it step by step, so the specific time could not be accurate to the second, and could only be estimated roughly. Lin En nodded and said confidently, "The time here is 4 hours, 27 minutes and 36 seconds. Hearing this, all the wizards present paused for a moment, but soon realized something, and their faces showed a mixture of surprise and surprise. "Does it mean that element 7 can affect time and artificially create an area with a high time flow rate?" Vittorio said in doubt. Aurora and others also looked at Lin En excitedly. If this is true, it is undoubtedly an amazing news. They know the horror of the difference in time flow rate. The 7 times the speed of the Parliament was definitely a great contribution to the smooth victory of the Lord of the Dead in Ella. It took the other side 1 month, but more than half a year has passed here. Not bad. Lin En laughed. He had noticed this when he was manipulating element 7 to return the streets to their original positions. Time and space are one and the same. Since the 4-dimensional coordinates of this street have changed, the flow rate of time will inevitably change. Chapter 629 4-dimensional coordinates and high-speed zone. The time and space characteristics revealed by the 7th element made all the wizards present very interested. Unfortunately, the requirements for studying this thing are too high. Not only does it require an unimaginable amount of magic power, but it also requires the ability to affect the dimension. The noise of the night soon subsided. The civilians in the capital who walked into the streets experienced the initial panic and fear, and then the surprise of the sudden return. After they were out of danger, they began to brag about this bizarre experience. A drunkard even swore that he could see his back as long as he turned his head in the street. Such a bizarre statement naturally caused a lot of civilians to laugh. Lin En had no intention of taking a break. After explaining the whole thing, he asked Rev and others to form a team to engage in dimension and space research, and to select wizards who specialize in theoretical studies. They may not be able to help in actual research, but their open minds may play a role. You have to know that the truly cutting-edge technology is often calculated directly on paper. However, with the previous accident as a lesson, Lin En did not dare to continue researching in the capital. After careful consideration, he planned to move the research laboratory of Element 7 to the moon. It was not that he was careless before. In fact, Lin En arranged extremely powerful protective magic in the research room of his own mansion, but it was a pity that it did not play much role in the face of the power of higher dimensions. Under the urgent deliberation and discussion of the Parliament, the members of the Dimension and Space Research Team were selected one by one. If it were not for Lin En limiting the number of people to less than 50, all the parliamentarians would have wanted everyone to go together. Everyone knew that this was a rare opportunity, especially those wizards who had been to foreign lands to perform missions, who understood this deeply. Obviously, I had only been there for less than half a year, but when I came back, I saw that the kingdom had become a different place. My colleagues had completed their promotions one by one, leaving only me still in the same place. So the competition for the quota was very fierce. Of course, there are disadvantages. Human lifespan is always limited. Staying in a high-speed time zone only means that this period of time has been spent in advance. Some apprentices who have no hope of promotion like to stay in a place where time passes slowly. In this way, when they return to the kingdom, they can see many new and interesting things, just like traveling to the future. The final result of the discussion was that half of the legendary speakers of the parliament stayed in the kingdom to preside over the subsequent development work, and then selected 40 great wizards who have made great achievements in magic research to assist. As for the venue, it is also easy to handle. Although the time-space gate from the Eternal Star to the Moon has long been opened, and the work of transforming the satellite to establish a habitable point is also underway, it is still very empty in general. Any area can be used as an experimental base. After a night of discussion, dozens of relevant proposals have been placed in front of Lin En. Herv wanted to take people to study whether the gravity of the planet will continue to work in this separated independent space. From the description of the civilians who entered the streets, gravity still exists, otherwise they would have floated up long ago. Whether it will have other effects requires further research. Vittorio even plans to go a step further and conduct multiple tests on the laws of chemistry and physics. Several wizards from the Nature Conservancy are planning to engage in farming and breeding in the high time velocity area. If they succeed, there will be no need to worry about food. A field of about 1 million acres can supply food for tens of millions of people, enough to cope with the growing population in the kingdom. In addition, there are also proposals on how to establish communication and real-time transmission between different time velocity areas, or to bring in a group of demon bats with a lifespan limit of 3 months to observe whether their lifespan will increase or decrease. Lin En went through all the proposals one by one, refuted some experiments that were too outrageous, and agreed to the rest. And others' considerations are basically very comprehensive. Many experiments will not only be carried out internally, but the parliament will also send people to establish corresponding experimental control groups on the moon to ensure the accuracy of the data. This is also the reason why Lin En asked the parliament to set up a research group. When others have done the miscellaneous work, he can spend more computing power on more important things. The most important thing is of course to save worry. In the next month, after Lin En gradually became familiar with the time and space characteristics of element 7 on the uninhabited moon, he personally used his divine power to peel off an area with a total area of about 100,000 square kilometers. It was a very wonderful feeling, just like driving a small sailboat on the rough sea, and once it lost its shelter, it would be swallowed by the quantum tide at any time. Just like the first, second and third dimensions, the fourth dimension also has 2 directions. The farther away from the original coordinates, the more obvious the space distortion and speed change. After some research, Lin En directly divided this distance into corresponding time units. Each time unit is equivalent to twice the time flow rate of the eternal star, and it can also enter the area with low time flow rate in reverse. Wait. The main world is not here too? Lin En suddenly thought of this terrifying question, and his brows frowned. He clearly remembered that when they first opened the time and space gate between the 2 worlds, the 2 sides had a time flow rate difference of 7.25 times, but when all the members retreated from the foreign land, this difference had been reduced to less than 7 times. Judging from the current situation, this means that their positions are constantly approaching. Once the velocity difference is reduced to 0, one of the 2 worlds will be captured by the other, or they will merge with each other. This is the method most gods in the main world use to find and assimilate planes. But Lin En's frown relaxed, because according to his guess, in addition to the coordinates of the 4th dimension, the coordinates of the other 3 dimensions of the 2 universes should also be different. It's like throwing a small ball in any direction with any force. The probability of hitting a fixed 3-dimensional coordinate by chance is very small. Realizing this, Lin En gathered his mind and put his energy back on research, and began to try the maximum time velocity difference. 2 times. 3 times. 4 times. The stripped experimental base was getting farther and farther away from the original coordinates. Lin En clearly felt a slight pressure, and the consumption of magic power began to surge to resist the increasingly strong quantum tides. Chapter 630. Use the continent as a ship and quantum as the sea. The endless quantum sea, the place where everything begins and ends. A continent with a diameter of about 100,000 square kilometers is like a lone boat in a storm, drifting in the quantum ocean, and Lin En is like an experienced helmsman, always using the coordinates of the eternal star as a fixed point to sail in this quantum ocean. However, there are obviously more travelers in the quantum sea. Just after Lin En increased the relative time flow rate to more than 10 times, he vaguely sensed the existence of other planes. This is not an intuitive sight, but the existence of the other party is perceived through the change of space curvature. These beings that are also free in the quantum sea are very large in size, and the influence of gravity can cover 4 dimensions at the same time. Like a giant ship cutting through the waves and crossing the sea, the ripples spread in all directions. Since he can perceive it so clearly, it proves that the other party is most likely very close to their position. Lin En can even roughly restore the general outline of that plane in his mind, but he dare not contact it rashly. The universe is too dangerous. The technology of the geometric civilization is already pretty good, and it can even create a cosmic wonder like a black hole. However, there are 3 such level 6 civilizations in this galaxy, and there are countless galaxies like this in the universe. Soon, as the speed of time increased further, the ripples in space began to become chaotic, which means that there are many travelers in the current area. Some are stationary or slow like a snail, while others are as fast as lightning, moving their positions non-stop. Just when Lin En increased the 4-dimensional coordinates to 15 times the time node, one of the targets in the space perception suddenly moved closer to this side. Lin En immediately became nervous. The courage to actively approach most likely means that the other party is fully confident, and it is likely to be a very powerful civilization. Just when Lin En was considering whether to escape by speeding the boat, the latter disappeared very abruptly. It disappeared without a trace, and the vibration caused by its gravity could no longer be sensed. At first, Lin En thought that maybe the other party had used some method to temporarily eliminate the influence of gravity, just like a submarine lurking on the seabed preparing to raid a ship needs to turn off the radar to avoid being detected. But Lin En quickly rejected this point, because the other party's forward speed in the dimension is much faster than his own. If he decided to raid, he would have launched the attack by now. Now a long time has passed, but there is still no movement. Could it be eliminated? Lin En thought with his mind open. Of course, this possibility is very low. It is more likely that something more important suddenly happened, so time and space jumped to other places. Almost facing a war made Lin En temporarily give up the plan to continue to move deeper into the quantum sea. He also noticed that compared with the eternal star or the universe, the area within 10 times the flow rate is relatively safe. This is probably because low-level civilizations do not have the ability to traverse the quantum sea, and for advanced civilizations that can control dimensions, a mere 10 times the flow rate will not have much effect. In addition, the surge in divine power consumption also made Lin En somewhat unbearable. If he wanted to maintain a high time flow rate for a long time, he needed to continuously consume divine power to resist the baptism of the quantum tide. The greater the flow rate difference, the deeper he went into the quantum sea, and the more he consumed. In the end, Lin En chose to adjust the time flow rate to about 10 times. After confirming that there were no other travelers near this speed zone, he divided some of his mind to check the movements of Herv and others. During the time when Lin En was concentrating on manipulating the changes in the dimensional coordinates, the wizards who entered together had already begun drastic transformation work. In view of the experience in the foreign land, several legendary speakers directly joined forces to build a large fusion furnace to provide light source as the sun, and rely on switching the fusion furnace to simulate the changes of day and night. Then it was to improve the soil quality and produce oxygen, which was the responsibility of the wizards of the Nature Conservation Association. By planting a magic plant called weaving mushroom, these 2 points can be achieved at the same time, and a certain amount of light source can also be produced. The initial transformation plan took several months, covering an area of about 10,000 kilometers, an area of 1/10 of the separated continent. With magic, the most versatile tool, the progress has become extremely fast. In less than half a year, the originally barren continent has already emerged with a moving emerald green. The next step is to place creatures and build an ecological cycle. This is just like the creation of the world. Raphael looked at the large grassland, jungle and river passing by in front of him, and said with emotion. Sanchez also nodded complacently. The large jungle was his masterpiece. It was hard to imagine that it was a desert with nothing here not long ago. But the next moment, a voice rang in everyone's ears. It's still a long way from the creation of the world. The speaker was naturally Lin En. After finishing various attempts in the quantum sea, he had been observing everyone's experiments. On the surface, it seems that the ecological circle of Sanchez and others has been well established. By placing an appropriate amount of predators and prey, a set of primary ecological cycles has been formed, but at the same time, there are also many things missing, such as the microbial community, which is simply wildly growing. Lin En is sure that once they leave, all the creatures inside will die out in a dozen years. Secondly, the place is still too small. 100,000 square kilometers sounds very large, equivalent to the area of a small country, but it is still too difficult to complete a complete ecological cycle without external assistance. Small-scale ecological out of control is likely to cause a chain reaction and lack the ability to self-regulate. After Lin En's one-by-one explanation, Raphael was somewhat embarrassed. Of course, he also understood that the ecosystem they had established was not perfect enough, and he was just expressing his feelings before. Lin En did not blindly blame them. He picked out these defects just to prevent everyone from being too proud. In fact, their experiments have achieved a lot of results. At least it has been proved that it is completely feasible to use high time velocity zones to grow crops and engage in breeding. It is just a matter of whether the technology is up to standard. In addition, just as they expected before, the gravitational force of the sun still affects this continent, and even the gravity changes they feel are very weak, which makes everyone feel amazed. You know, they can't see where the sun is now. Chapter 631 Lin En's Planet Upgrading Plan. How exactly does the gravity of the moon and the sun affect this place? Trev was puzzled. They had clearly left their original position and could not receive any light from the stars. He even tried to dig down, but found that there was nothing under the rock layer and it was not connected to anywhere. This is probably because our three-dimensional coordinates have not changed, Lin En said thoughtfully. So we are actually still in the same place now. Raphael was really a little hard to understand. You can say that, Lin En laughed. For example, this continent is a point on a plane coordinate system, and the x-axis and y-axis are both one. Now the coordinates have changed from a plane to a three-dimensional solid, with an additional z-axis, and only its three-dimensional coordinates have changed, from 1 to 10. What about the x and y-axis? Can you say that it has changed? The wizards present immediately fell into thinking. Their Olympiad level was not bad, so they could naturally understand the high-dimensional theory that Lin En explained with the coordinate axis as an example. Gravity can penetrate 4 dimensions. Since the coordinates of the first 3 dimensions have not changed, the sun and the moon can still affect the continent that has been stripped off their feet in these 3 dimensions. It was like two people standing opposite each other but unable to look up. One of them suddenly flew to a height of 10 meters. To the other person suddenly disappeared. He could not see any figure around him, but the two parties could still hear each other, because the propagation of sound involves 3 dimensions. Previously, Lin En only changed the coordinates of the 4th dimension to return the street to its original position, which was also one of the evidences. You must know that the universe is constantly changing. The eternal star is rotating around the sun at a speed of 30 kilometers per second. The galaxy they are in is also rotating at a very fast speed towards the huge gravitational source in the center of the river. Even the galaxy itself is moving. If there is no gravity pulling them, by the time they return, they will have flown billions of kilometers away. Seeing that event, others have understood what he meant. Lin En did not explain anymore. Instead, he looked at Vittorio on the side and asked about his experiment. Many classical physical laws become disordered here, but microscopic laws are still valid, Vittorio replied. During this period of time, he did more than 1,000 experiments and found many interesting things. For example, the gravitational acceleration in this continent is an uncertain value, with a general error of about 15%, which may be related to the change of the coordinates of the 4th dimension. Some chemical reactions have also become much more intense here, and he has not figured out the specific reasons. As for the absolute zero, the speed of light in a vacuum, and the gravitational constant, these cosmic constants have not changed much. Lin En nodded, which is consistent with his previous guess. By the way, Speaker Lin En, how many times has the time flow rate on this continent increased now? Trev asked curiously. Compared to the eternal star, it is about 10 times. Lin En responded. 10 times. The wizards present were somewhat surprised. Doesn't that mean that the speed difference between the eternal star and the foreign land is greater? Is this the limit? Vittorio asked again. Of course not. Lin En shook his head, hesitated for a moment, and then roughly recounted his experience in the quantum sea. Hearing that there are many civilizations in the quantum sea that are in the high time flow area, Trev and others frowned immediately. This is not good news. Lin En was very open-minded. This universe was so huge that it was normal for some civilizations that could manipulate higher dimensions to appear. In the universe, No matter how powerful you are, there are always civilizations that are more powerful than you. No matter how weak you are, there are always beings that are weaker than you. And they also have a unique advantage. That is, they have the treasure of magic power. Now we need another element 7. How much will it cost to resist the quantum tide? And how long can it last? Prov quickly asked a very important question. Lin En made a rough calculation. In general, the faster the flow of time, the greater the consumption. With my current strength, I can maintain a flow rate of 10 times until my divine power is exhausted, and I can probably last for about 15 years. But he certainly can't consume all the accumulated divine power, so the limit is to maintain it for about 10 years. If the magic power of other wizards and the magic network is called upon, it can continue to last for a while, but due to the speed difference between the two sides, it will only be replenished at 1/10 of the speed, a full 10-fold gap, which is simply not enough to cover the cost. In this case, this method can no longer be used as a common means, Prov said with great regret. To some extent, divine power is also a scarce resource, not to mention that to build a high-speed zone, it is necessary to limit the combat power of Lin En, the only true god in the current parliament. Raphael, Vittorio and others were also somewhat disappointed. They had thought of many plans before, which required the help of the high-speed zone. Now they are afraid that they will be postponed. That may not be the case. Lin En smiled and shook his head. It depends on whether the geometric stars who stay in the New World can complete the biological transformation plan according to my instructions. You mean? Prov's eyes lit up and he immediately understood what Lin En meant. If those geometric stars can really create powerful monsters with gratifying growth and rapid iteration, they can use the endless soul conversion divine power to offset the consumption of maintaining the high-speed zone and achieve a perfect positive cycle. The most important thing is that the scope is an entire planet. How many resources can this produce? Just thinking about it makes people excited. But, will this really work? Vittorio was somewhat worried. The planet compensated to them by the geometry civilization was nearly 1,000 times larger than the continent under their feet. It should be possible. Lin En was 90% sure. He had tested the limit of the low-dimensional expansion of element 7. 500 tons could barely cover a planet. In theory, this low-dimensional expansion is almost infinite, but if the thickness is too thin, it will be difficult to resist the scouring of quantum tides. It was precisely because of the risk that he did not use it directly on the eternal star. If something went wrong, the loss would be great. After setting the plan for the planet's dimensional upgrade, Lin En began to return the stripped continent to its original position. The purpose of this experiment has been basically achieved, and it can be considered a success. Chapter 632. This is definitely a more efficient energy source than element 7. In the New World, in the Planet Ecology Research Institute, after more than half a year of hard work, the experiment on the new biological community has been preliminarily completed. Lin En and others who received the news at the same time immediately put down their work and arrived at the station through the portal on the moon. The special energy you spread on this planet before was simply amazing. Seeing Lin En again, the manager Money was extremely excited. Although he had expected it at the beginning, after a detailed and in-depth understanding, the magic of magic still exceeded his imagination, and it can even be said to have overturned his cognition. This thing can actually achieve quantum-level control and truly achieve a deep impact on matter from a microscopic level. Money has figured out all the incredible abilities that the other party showed more than half a year ago, but the more he studied, the more frightened he was. The civilization that can fully master this energy may be far more powerful than the expectations of the disk leaders. This is definitely a more efficient energy source than element 7. While Lin En was casually responding to the words of the administrator Money, he took the quantum storage device handed over by the other party. Inside was all the research data from more than half a year, which was stored in a chip with a diameter of only 1 centimeter. Reading was also very simple. There was a unique biological interface inside the body of the geometric star. Putting the chip in could receive the internal information. It was not difficult for Lin En either. Deciphering this level of information was still possible for a high-dimensional life form. About 2 minutes later, all the information had been presented in Lin En's mind. There were video materials, Various data were also very comprehensive, and even failed cases were recorded. These were all very valuable biological transformation experiences. The result of money and others was to cultivate 27 kinds of demonized creatures, covering herbivores, carnivores, scavengers and omnivores, forming a complete ecosystem, and they only took about 2 to 5 months from birth to death. Most importantly, these creatures also have the third and fourth levels of wisdom. This level of wisdom comes from the geometric civilization, which is divided into about 7 levels. The first level is only biological instinct, such as small insects like bees and ants. Their brain capacity is very small, and most of their behavior comes from instinct, that is, the genetic information engraved in DNA. The second level is considered to be initially intelligent. Most birds, reptiles, and fish are mostly at this level. They can think simply and know how to seek benefits and avoid harm. Those large creatures are basically at the third level, and can carry out slightly more complex social actions. Their IQ is equivalent to that of a child of a few years old. The fourth level can be described as humanoid creatures, such as the dog-headed people in the Eternal Star. They have their own settlements. Some leaders know some shallow magic, know how to build simple houses and shelters, and have their own language, but due to various innate limitations, it is difficult to be called a real civilization. Humans are naturally the fifth level, completely separated from ordinary creatures, and can carry out very complex social interactions, develop culture and technology, but some behaviors are still limited by the influence of genes. The geometric star people are the sixth level, and can modify their bodies and adjust their genes at will. They will no longer be bound by the so-called biological instincts. Their brains are comparable to a supercomputer and can handle multiple tedious tasks at the same time. As for the seventh level intelligent creatures, the geometry star people had never seen them before, so they were added in recent years. They are high-dimensional life forms. According to the geometry star people's assumptions, the other party has exceeded the scope of carbon-based life forms. Even three-dimensional life forms, and has no concept of genes and flesh at all. Naturally, they are more advanced intelligent creatures. In fact, with the technological level of geometry civilization, it is not difficult to genetically modify the fifth and sixth level intelligent organisms, but Lin En specifically asked the other party to limit the intelligence of these creatures to 3 or 4 levels. First, it is not humane to breed and enslave highly intelligent creatures, and second, it is easy to cause problems and the cost of management is high. If humans on Earth knew that there was an existence that limited their lifespans and that their souls would be harvested and converted into divine power after death, they would have to think about how to kill gods every day, and they might even rebel and stop having children. Therefore, the gods of the main world usually compile a set of reasonable doctrines for brainwashing, and also give some particularly devout believers the right to pardon, so that their souls can enter the kingdom of God and enjoy eternal peace. After understanding the basic situation on this planet, Lin En nodded with satisfaction. "You have done a good job, Mr. Mooney. We have already felt the goodwill of the geometry civilization." Lin En's words undoubtedly made Mooney and others feel relieved. They were most afraid that they would be killed after building the ecosystem. After all, they participated in the research of magic, an extremely magical energy source. Now it seems that the other party does not care much about the leakage of magic information. Before, they only gave verbal warnings. In the past 6 months, Mooney has communicated with the Mother World several times. As long as they do not leak specific detailed research information about magic, they will not be warned. Playing the edge ball is allowed. Perhaps this thing is not as important as imagined for high-dimensional civilization. Realizing this, Mooney was somewhat melancholy. The divine objects they were thinking about might be just ordinary things in the eyes of others. Just as Mooney was thinking, Lin En looked at the surveillance screen in the hall and spoke again. "This progress is still too slow. It's better to speed it up." "Is this still slow?" The faces of the geometry star people present were not very good. They used the most advanced technology of civilization this time, and the lifespan and iteration speed of organisms are not as short as possible. If the lifespan is too short, after a dozen iterations, its IQ will begin to degenerate. because it does not use its brain at all, and it is difficult to accumulate enough knowledge to pass on to the next generation. Money has no doubt that the other party has more advanced biological technology, but he did not use it directly before, and only mentioned it suddenly now, which is like a deliberate humiliation. You seem to have misunderstood what I mean. Lin En saw the thoughts of the geometry star people. Although Money and others concealed their emotions well, the electromagnetic waves still exposed them. But it doesn't matter, you will know soon. The moment the voice fell, Lin En had disappeared from the spot, and when he appeared again, he had reached the highest peak of this world. He stretched out his hand and a ball of glowing matter immediately appeared in his palm, and then quickly expanded to cover everything around. Chapter 633. This is the Empire's most advanced technological dimension control. With the previous two attempts, this low-dimensional expansion went very smoothly. In order to conceal that he relied on Element 7 to do this, Lin En also deliberately added some artificial flash effects and blocked the detection capabilities of the detectors distributed around. The low-dimensional expansion was very fast, covering the entire planet in just a few seconds. This is far from the limit. Lin En predicted that its speed might reach the speed of light. At the same time, in the Planetary Ecology Research Institute, Mooney and other geometry stars stared at the display screen in front of them, watching Lin's actions one by one. While thinking about what the other party wanted to do, the sky darkened. The scorching sun was still at noon the moment before, and the whole planet stepped into darkness the next moment. What's going on? Is it night? A geometry star said in astonishment. He suspected that Lin might have accelerated the rotation of the planet, so it changed from day to night. But Mooney vaguely realized that things were not that simple. He mobilized the detectors distributed all over the planet at the fastest speed and looked at the sky at the same time. The star emitting light and heat completely disappeared from the detection range of all detectors. It was obviously not as simple as the planet turning half a circle more. Mooney suspected that the other party had transferred an entire planet to another place in the universe in an instant. No, it might not be as simple as space transfer, because even the stars in the sky also disappeared. Mooney immediately turned his head to look at Herve and others who followed Lin En, looking forward to an answer. Look, this is one of the cutting-edge technologies of the Magic Empire. It can control the fourth dimension and build a high-speed area, which is about 10 times the flow rate of the universe. Raphael said with a smile. This information was also allowed by Lin En to be disclosed, so Raphael did not mean to hide it. According to Lin En, even if they deliberately concealed it, they would be able to analyze it soon after these geometric stars reconnected with the mother world, so it would be better to be generous and actively disclose it. Looking at the flashing lights on Money and others, Raphael was quite proud. In the previous contact with the geometry civilization, they had a deep understanding of the other party's strength, and the parliament could only rely on the deterrence of the gods of the main world. Now it was finally their turn to use real technology to show off. The flashing lights around him lasted for a full minute before stopping. Money barely controlled his outward emotions, but the horror in his heart did not diminish at all. The technology of manipulating dimensions to change the flow of time is exactly what the geometry civilization is vigorously conquering. It is known as one of the 3 key technologies that can improve the level of civilization. However, the top scientific researchers of the geometry civilization have not even been able to completely master the curvature engine, let alone such dimensional technology. Among the powerful civilizations that Money knew, there was a cosmic civilization that mastered similar technology, which was completely beyond their reach. According to the speculation of the leaders of the disk, this civilization has long been in 2 completely opposite states: technological stagnation and leapfrog technological development. Because as long as the basic technology breaks through, the other party can allow some cutting-edge scientific researchers, or even an entire planet, to enter a time flow rate that is more than 10 times faster than the universe, and complete the research and development of technology in a very short time. This is the real technological explosion. And this technology can also be used in cosmic wars. You can imagine how much advantage a civilization that can produce fleets and various resources at 10 times or even dozens of times the speed can have in a war. Could it be that the Magic Empire is already a cosmic civilization? This thought came to Money's mind. In fact, when the Magic Empire demonstrated the curvature engine, ultra-long-distance space jump, and dimensional life transformation technology, it had already had similar ideas. But their understanding of cosmic civilizations basically comes from hearsay and rumors on the edge of the galaxy, and the powerful civilization that can master the dimension almost killed itself in the end. Being able to achieve a huge breakthrough in technology in a short period of time is undoubtedly an advantage, but it also hides disasters. It is said that after a certain technological jump, the galaxy that entered the high-speed area launched a rebellion with technology that exceeded one level. This war lasted for thousands of years, and tens of thousands of stars were destroyed. After paying a huge price, the rebels won the final victory and disappeared into the universe with the remaining star systems of civilization, probably entering a high-dimensional space. This is also the only cosmic civilization they know of. In addition, even the mortal enemy of the geometric civilization, the silicon-based civilization whose territory covers an entire galaxy, has not been able to break through this level. Because some of the opponent's technology trees seem to be wrong, the carbon-based civilization alliance they formed can barely resist. Money immediately made up his mind that the next time he communicated with the Mother World, he would remind the leaders of the disk to improve their assessment of the strength of the Magic Empire again. At the same time, high in the sky, Lin En was concentrating on driving an entire planet, traveling through the endless quantum sea. This is much more difficult than driving the previous lunar continent, and the consumption is much greater. The accumulated divine power is like a flood, rushing out to maintain the low-dimensional expansion of the seventh element. The only thing to be thankful for is that this time, there was no thrilling accident. Just as he had guessed before, the flow rate within 10 times was not favored by powerful civilizations, and weak civilizations could not reach it, but it was just right for their civilization that took advantage of the situation. It took about 5 days for Lin En to push the planet into the appropriate 4-dimensional coordinates, and then looked at the planet shrouded in darkness. "It's time to build a sun," Lin En muttered to himself, then flew to the coast, raised his hand, and huge waves were lifted up. Trillions of tons of seawater sprayed into the sky against common sense, forming a huge water column with a diameter of more than 5 kilometers. Lin En clenched his fist expressionlessly, and a huge amount of seawater immediately blasted away and was reduced to various basic elements. Then it began to circle and select, and the heavier tritium and deuterium elements were separated. The next step is fusion. Lin used his divine power to create a strong magnetic field as a cage, continuously increasing the pressure and raising the temperature inside to over 100 million degrees. The light of fusion soon appeared on the vast sea surface. Then, the second, the third. Because the sun created was not as large as a star, and the energy released was completely not in the same order of magnitude, it was impossible to find the entire world, so the only way to win was by quantity. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 634, 3 Days in the Sky and the Disappearing Planet. The sun suddenly went out, and the world fell into darkness for 5 days, causing panic among the creatures in the new world. The biological clock was completely disrupted, and both predators and prey were running around like headless flies. The originally orderly world suddenly became extremely chaotic. However, all this changed on the 6th day. All the creatures on the seashore felt the blazing heat that seemed to burn everything. Under the gaze of countless eyes, a sun rose above the sea, followed by the second and third. They hung high above the sky, spreading their light and heat outward, and the seawater below quickly evaporated under the terrifying high temperature, forming a strange and dazzling light fog. In the new world, all the creatures who witnessed all this were shocked by the wonders of the 3-day soaring. Gulu, Gili Gulu, sun, There are actually 3 suns. A group of creatures about 1 meter tall and with strange looks gathered on the coast, making chaotic and noisy sounds. This creature was named Broad-Eyed Beast by the Geometry Star people. Their eyes are very special. After optimization and transformation, they can easily see very far areas. They are also one of the 3 cultivated 4th-level intelligent life species. Although they were born in this world for only about 4 months, they have already possessed basic common sense and completed the first iteration because they were transformed from the native creatures of the planet. The geometry civilization has engraved a lot of basic knowledge and biological instincts in their genes, allowing them to spontaneously learn to hunt, cooperate, and even simple language. It is precisely because of their higher wisdom that they are most deeply touched by the wonder of the world suddenly falling into darkness and 3 suns rising at the same time. It is a fear of the unknown and disorder that goes deep into the bone marrow. Just a few months ago, these broad-eyed beasts had just elected a leader and summarized the law that the sun would rise and set at a fixed time. As a result, before the elders of the tribe could carve this law on the tree in the form of an image, a sudden change occurred. An elder of the broad-eyed beast, unable to accept that the natural law he had spent his entire life summing up was wrong, suddenly looked up and stared at the 3 scorching suns that appeared on the sea. That was the most dazzling thing he had ever seen in his life, even more powerful than the lightning that fell on the rainstorm. With the exceptionally excellent vision due to the magic enhancement and genetic modification, the elder of the broad-eyed beast was surprised to find that there was a faint black shadow in the center of the sun, and it was moving. But just this one glance, he couldn't stand it. The strong light of the 3 suns was extremely fierce, and his eyes seemed to be burning. But the elder of the broad-eyed beast didn't care, but opened his eyes wider, trying to see clearly what the black shadow was. He vaguely realized that this might be the truth, that the whole world fell into darkness and the 3 suns were in the air. The next moment, a painful and crazy roar resounded on the coast. The elder covered his eyes tightly, and dark green tissue fluid continued to flow out of his shriveled pupils. His eyes were burned blind. And the eyes are the most proud and precious thing of the broad-eyed beast. After paying a terrible price, the elder also saw something that others had never seen. He ignored his blind eyes and shouted loudly at the sky. Lulud, Gulud. A large number of broad-eyed beasts hurriedly raised their heads and looked at the sky, but most of them could not bear the terrifying strong light brought by the 3 suns. They only vaguely saw a black shadow and closed their eyes in shock. Only less than 1% of the broad-eyed beasts overcame their physical discomfort with amazing perseverance and saw the truth. But their eyes were also blinded by the strong light like those elders. Painful wails echoed continuously on the coast, but even though their eyes were blinded, those broad-eyed beasts still held their heads high, screaming in pain and shouting continuously, Lulud, Gulud. More and more broad-eyed beasts followed suit and shouted. Lulud is a fantasy of the broad-eyed beast tribe because they are afraid of typhoons, lightning and huge waves. It is the controller of all disasters, sky, ocean and earth. Translated, it means God. Lin En, who had just finished pinching 3 suns, also noticed the thousands of broad-eyed beasts gathered on the coast. They kept shouting and jumping. Some of the blind broad-eyed beasts looked up at the sky, as if they were swearing something, while the rest of the tribe lowered their heads, as if they were afraid of the sun's light. Interesting. Lin En probed the power into the brains of some broad-eyed beasts and soon understood what they were thinking. The seeds of faith have been planted. This was not within his expectations, but it might be a good attempt. Lin En pondered, but did not interfere. He wanted to show the miracle. His hands kept moving. He flew into the sky with 3 suns and placed them in the planetary orbit in order. They flew in 3 directions and rotated around the world like satellites. Their orbital heights and speeds were carefully calculated by Lin En. For most of the year, the creatures on the planet can basically only see 1 sun, and occasionally they can find 2. As for the 3-day vacancy, it may only meet once every few years. The ecology of this planet is expected to undergo significant changes. Fortunately, they have invited outside help this time, so they should be able to cope with it. Isn't this a geocentric theory? In the research institute, and others who were watching this scene were all amazed, but because there were outsiders around them, They could only sigh silently in their hearts. If Ella had the same great power at the beginning, then someone's heliocentric theory would probably become a heresy. The geometry star people were very calm this time. Creating a few small suns is not a problem for geometry civilization, but it is not as convenient as Lin En. What really makes money wonder is why the Magic Empire, as a cosmic civilization, has to spend so much effort on this ecological transformation, and also spread magic power, which is very precious, on this planet. Is it preparing to conduct some kind of experiment, for example, testing the impact of magic power on carbon-based intelligent creatures? Money thought it was very likely, and hurriedly asked people to start a batch of atomic-level biological transformation machines again, and secretly recorded the precious data. On the other side, in the disk conference room of the geometry civilization in the great universe, a group of disk leaders also received an emergency report from Raven Star. The planet they were monitoring suddenly disappeared. Chapter 635, Grazing Planet. What? The planet numbered 1700 suddenly disappeared? In the disk conference room, the leaders who received the intelligence couldn't help but wonder if they had heard it wrong. If the report said that the galaxy governor who was on the planet suddenly disappeared, they could still understand it. But if it said that the entire planet disappeared, it would be a bit weird. Or does this disappearance mean being destroyed? Before the disk leaders could ask, the monitor sent back the corresponding image through quantum communication. In the desolate universe, a huge planet was slowly rotating around a star. At a certain moment, a layer of glittering film material suddenly emerged from the interior of the planet, covering the entire planet. Then, within 100 atomic seconds, everything disappeared in front of them. The disk leaders present magnified the transmitted image thousands of times, but they still couldn't fully understand how the entire planet disappeared. The disk conference room suddenly fell into a strange silence, but this silence did not last long, and bursts of colorful light soon flashed in the conference room. An entire planet disappeared without a trace, which was beyond their cognition. Although it was easy for the geometry civilization to destroy a planet, it was only destruction. The other party completely wiped out the planet in an instant, and there was no obvious energy aftermath that was detected by them, which was a bit shocking. Could it be some kind of wormhole transmission technology? A ring-shaped leader speculated. The Magic Empire had shown them ultra-long-distance space-time transmission before, so he suspected that the planet did not disappear, but was transferred to other places in the universe. The geometry civilization also has similar space-time transmission technology, but it can only be used to stably transmit fleets and materials when there are coordinates, or to make unstable short-distance space-time jumps without coordinates. It is impossible to directly transmit an entire planet to another place through a wormhole with their existing technology. But soon someone put forward a second guess. Is it possible that the other party just used some special device that can hide the location of the planet? According to the previous report, before the planet disappeared, the spacecraft cruising nearby had detected a strong electromagnetic wave reaction, so the other party might have used some kind of electromagnetic wave shielding device to visually create the illusion of disappearances on the spot. However, these two speculations were quickly rejected, because after discovering that planet 1700 suddenly disappeared, the cruising spacecraft entered the galaxy to explore. In order to avoid misunderstandings, the spacecraft also sent a special notice before leaving, using the reason that it came to hand over some compensation materials. This was also a strategy that had been decided before to deal with emergencies. However, the intelligence detected by the spacecraft made the leaders of the disk feel a little hesitant. The planet did disappear completely in the galaxy. The spacecraft even turned around along the original orbit of the planet, but found nothing. By the way, I remember that Mooney and his crew are still on planet 1700. Their coordinates should be recorded. The ring-shaped leader suddenly reminded. Everyone present immediately reacted. The name Mooney had only appeared in their vision recently. If it were any other time, a captain in charge of planetary transformation would not be in their eyes. But Mooney unexpectedly won the appreciation of the interstellar governor, and even risked a great deal to pass on some key intelligence. so he was instantly remembered by all the leaders of the disk. This is a great hero. If he can return safely, he must be rewarded. Of course, the most important thing now is to find out where the missing planet number 1700 has gone. For a moment, everyone's eyes were focused on the observer. After the latter urgently contacted the spaceship in the 1700th star system, a dazzling light suddenly appeared on his body, and he stumbled to communicate. Now, the location of the detection spaceship overlaps with the location of the coordinates of Mooney and others. As soon as these words came out, the originally noisy conference room immediately quieted down, but this false calm was broken the next moment. How is this possible? A disk leader slapped the table in astonishment. You mean the exploration spacecraft is now inside planet 1700, but can't see anything? Could it be that all their detection methods have been blocked, and even close observations will be affected? Amidst the constant quarrels and discussions, a voice suddenly resounded in the conference hall. I suspect this may involve higher dimensional technology. The one who spoke was the chief space-time and dimension engineer of the geometry civilization. His eyes never left the transmitted influences, and he made a bold guess. It's like raising a cup high up and placing another cup in the same place. Of course, their two-dimensional coordinates will overlap. Just as the geometry civilization was shocked by the strange disappearance of the planet, in the New World, at 10 times the speed of time, a year had quietly passed. A year on the scale of the universe is very short. A galaxy voyage may take several years, but for the creatures of the New World, it is extremely long. Many creatures have iterated 4 or 5 times. In the first few months, the impact of the 3 suns caused the extinction of a large number of plants and animals, but fortunately, organisms can always find a way out, and the adaptability brought by rapid iteration is also very good. However, the most important thing is the microbiological transformation machine of the geometric star people, which can quietly realize the modification of a race's genetic level, providing a lot of convenience. After Lin En arranged all this, he received the results of breathing with peace of mind. More than 20 kinds of magically transformed organisms are spread all over the world. Thanks to the terrifying reproduction and growth rate, the number of intelligent organisms has soon exceeded 1 billion. And the number of ordinary creatures has exceeded 100 billion, not including insects, plankton and various microorganisms. Almost every minute and every second, countless creatures die because of the cruel struggle for survival. A large number of souls are included in the Godhead under the inspiration of the dead priesthood, and then transformed into magic to resist the scouring of the quantum sea. Chapter 636, Electromagnetic Priesthood and Broad-Eyed Beast Prophet. Lin En was hanging high in the void, looking down at the entire planet below. This place has long become his divine domain, so even without the help of the detectors distributed on various continents, Lin En can still intuitively see what happens on the planet every moment, including large-scale tribal wars involving millions of intelligent creatures, and the law of the jungle at the edge of the jungle. Although this is already the 4th divine domain constructed by Lin En, it is very different. In the Eternal Star, humans are the absolute protagonists, and because they were once human beings, Lin En adopted a more gentle approach, which can be regarded as a long-term and mutually beneficial approach. As for other intelligent races and monsters, their numbers are relatively small, and they are always restricted when studying them. The alien world and the moon are a world that is about to perish, and the other is a desolate satellite, neither of which is a complete star of life. The planet under his feet is a real test site that can be used at will. Lin En stretched out his hand, and countless floating light spots suddenly appeared in his palm, densely packed, and the number was too numerous to count. However, most of the light spots looked very dim, like some kind of plankton, floating aimlessly, and only a few seemed very active, constantly rushing around. Each light spot was a soul. Billions of souls were bound in a palm-sized ring-shaped sphere. In this year, there were certainly more than just a few dead creatures on the planet. After some experiments, Lin En found that even in a high-concentration magic environment, only intelligent creatures above the 4th level could condense a substantial soul. After the natural death of other creatures with low intelligence levels, Their consciousness will be connected to the body and perish together, unless they mutate under the transformation of magic. After studying for a while, Lin En's mind moved, and the gray-white dead mist spread and surged, and a large number of souls were immediately swallowed up by the death power and turned into nutrients. The soul is the medium for the conversion of matter and magic, which is a previously verified guess. With the necromancy priesthood, this conversion has become very convenient and almost does not require him to spend much effort. It took a day to transform such a huge number of souls. The vast amount of souls replenished Lin En's divine power, which was gradually depleted due to resisting the scouring of the quantum sea. The surplus was about 40%, and it can be expected that as time goes by, when the number of intelligent creatures increases further, this proportion will increase a lot. Lin En also plans to take this opportunity to do something. Concentrate a priesthood. The priesthood is an extremely important source of power for a god. For example, before obtaining the priesthood of the dead, he might have spent half a month to transform these billions of souls, but now it only takes about a day. It is a bit like a more advanced spell position. When a god with this priesthood casts the corresponding system of divine arts, it is as natural as breathing. As for the divine arts involving other priesthoods, Lin En has always believed that it will not have much impact. But after formally contacting the gods of the main world, he changed his mind. Because the gods who fought with him basically used the power of their own priesthoods in a routine way, Lin En couldn't help but guess that he might be a special case, because there were no other priesthoods in this world, and the priesthood of mathematics was very extensive, covering almost every aspect. Ellis should have realized this, or discovered something from the legacy of the previous moon god. When he first established his faith and promoted his doctrine, he gave himself the title of the god of creation and forcibly suppressed it, trying to make all believers believe that he controlled everything in the world. Of course, Ellis' plan was bound to fail in the end. With the population of 20 million and millions of devout believers on the eternal star, it was impossible to gather such a high-ranking priesthood. Lin En did not intend to ascend to heaven in one step, nor was he prepared to spend a lot of time to gather a priesthood that was not very useful. After consideration, he set his goal on thunder. Thunder and lightning are very powerful natural forces. Their essence is that positive and negative charges attract each other, and finally meet to produce a neutralization effect. After Anthony developed the electrotherapy, even formal wizards could barely use its power, and would be restrained by the Faraday cage. But the power of thunder is not that simple. You must know that the strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force and electromagnetic force among the four fundamental forces are all related to it. Only the gravity involving dimension and time and space cannot be unified. It can be said that in addition to dimension, electromagnetic force is the fundamental existence that constitutes the law of operation of all things in the universe. Its upper limit is amazingly large, which is why Lin En chose this priesthood. Now we have to take this opportunity to condense the priesthood of the electromagnetic system while completing the breakthrough. Lin En closed his eyes and sensed it. The thick dark clouds in the sky were gradually condensing, and strong thunder was constantly flashing inside. Time passed day by day. After 3 years of barbaric expansion, demonized creatures were everywhere on this planet. As one of the 3 fourth-level intelligent creatures, the broad-eyed beast has undoubtedly become the protagonist of one of the continents. Those broad-eyed beasts who once looked at the sun and were blinded by burning eyes have become the prophets of the tribe. They claim to have received divine revelation and see the truth of the world. And after losing their eyes, their ears and perception abilities became more sensitive than before. Under the influence of magic, they can also control fire and strong winds. This is undoubtedly regarded as a gift from God. If the rest of the tribesmen want to become prophets and learn to master the power of fire and strong winds, they must look directly at the 3 suns every few years when the 3-day sky-high scene appears, and offer their most proud eyes in exchange for God's gift and enlightenment. Some prophets of the broad-eyed beasts firmly believe that the stars in the sky disappeared because God gathered them together and created 2 more suns. That sea area has become a holy place in the minds of the broad-eyed beasts. As time goes by, the myths passed down by word of mouth have become more and more outrageous. A large number of books and legends about God that have been made up are engraved on the rock walls for believers to worship. Under the fanatical belief, some broad-eyed beasts will even take the initiative to poke out their eyes to show their piety and try to obtain divine enlightenment. However, God has no time to pay attention to them. Chapter 637 The storm is the cry of God, and the thunder is the wrath of God. On the three-star day, during the celebration of worshipping the gods, the great prophet Maked of the broad-eyed beast tribe stared at the sky covered by dark clouds, feeling extremely sad. According to the records in the classics, every 4 years at this time, 3 suns would rise at the same time on the other side of the sea, forming a spectacle of 3 suns rising into the sky. But this time the situation was very different. There were nothing but dark clouds in the sky, and a powerful thunderstorm could be vaguely seen condensing inside. This kind of bad weather has lasted for hundreds of days, so that the broad-eyed beasts of recent generations have never seen the sun from birth to death. The occasional heavy rain has posed a huge challenge to the survival and reproduction of the tribe. So the great prophet Maked has been waiting for the miracle of 3 suns rising into the sky to dispel all the haze. But it is a pity that looking at the current astronomical phenomenon, Maked suddenly realized that his idea was likely to fail. Noisy grunts continued to echo along the coast. The broad-eyed beasts who gathered nearby and came to participate in the celebration were also somewhat uneasy. They stared at Maked and others on the stage, expecting these prophets who had received divine inspiration to give an explanation. In particular, when will the gradually spreading thunderstorm weather be calmed down? Good weather is needed for hunting, fishing, animal husbandry and planting. The great prophet Maked stared at the anxious broad-eyed beasts below with his empty eyes. After pondering for a moment, his loud voice soon rang out. This is a warning from the gods, my people. The storm is the gods' cry, and the thunder is the gods' anger. Obviously, this kind of weather is the punishment of the great gods for the entire tribe. The words of the great prophet caused an uproar among the hundreds of thousands of broad-eyed beasts gathered here. Fear gathered in the minds of every broad-eyed beast. From time to time, some people nervously asked the great prophet what they had done wrong to offend the gods and thus bring down their anger. The great prophet Maked raised his scepter high to stop the noise, and then raised his voice again, saying compassionately, "The reason for this divine punishment is that there is a crack in our faith. With the expansion of tribal territory and population, more and more broad-eyed beast tribes have deviated from their original intentions, and even disregarded the protection and guidance of the gods, provoked wars between tribes, and wantonly created killings. This is a betrayal of God's grace." Maked became more and more excited as he spoke, and the broad-eyed beasts gathered on the seashore soon immersed themselves in it. There was no doubt about the words of the great prophet, because when the storm appeared and spread, it was the time when the tribal war was the most intense. However, at this moment, a violent shouting voice suddenly interrupted the great prophet's impassioned words. "Lies! These are all lies!" The sharp and piercing voice instantly attracted everyone's attention, and the great prophet Maked was naturally no exception. He was extremely shocked and angry that someone dared to refute his words in public. To everyone's surprise, the one who spoke was the leader of a large tribe. "Are you going to question the divine revelation, Shago?" The great prophet Maked also recognized it. Although his eyes were blind, the wind would always tell him the answer. Maked's rebuke was severe enough to describe it. Blasphemy was an unforgivable crime in the tribe of broad-eyed beasts. Even the tribal leader would be punished most severely. However, Shago was not afraid at all and shouted angrily, "There is no divine revelation at all. Maked, you deceived us. You deceived everyone." Just as the broad-eyed beasts were in an uproar, Shago raised his hand high, and a fierce flame suddenly erupted from his palm, roaring, "This is the evidence." Maked's calm face suddenly became extremely ugly. In the mouths of the prophets, magic is a gift from the gods, a gift given to the most devout believers. It is necessary to offer the most precious eyes of the broad-eyed beasts in order to be qualified to learn and master it. And now Shago has mastered magic without any guidance and without looking directly at the 3 suns to obtain the grace of God. Seeing the flames erupting from Shago's palm, All the broad-eyed beasts present were horrified. Even some of the prophets had expressions of disbelief on their faces, and a crack appeared in their firm faith. They gave up their proud farsightedness to gain the ability to control the flames. Now Shago told them that they didn't need to endure these unspeakable pains at all. How could they accept this? Lies. These are all lies. There is no divine revelation at all. It is these prophets who misinterpreted the will of God and angered the gods. They are the blasphemers. The leaders of the other tribes also took the opportunity to attack, shouting loudly, and then led the guards to kill the high platform. This was undoubtedly a premeditated power change. Since the first group of prophets witnessed the miracle, theocracy has completely surpassed secular power, and even the appointment and removal of the leaders of the major tribes must obey the will of God. In the past, fearing the power of God, many tribal leaders could only swallow their anger, and now they have finally waited for this opportunity. The bad weather has made the broad-eyed beasts living on this continent miserable, and the dozens of prayers and sacrifices of the prophets have not had any effect. Doubts have been heard one after another, so this grand celebration has become the best opportunity. Kill these rebels for me. The great prophet Mika waved his scepter in anger, spraying a strong stream of fire, killing several approaching broad-eyed beasts. However, the other prophets were pampered on weekdays and were completely caught off guard. Due to the bad rainy weather, the air became extremely humid, and the power of the flames was greatly weakened. Many prophets were stabbed to the ground by sharp-boned spears before they could even cast magic. Blood and wailing continued to resound on the coast, and tens of thousands of corpses dyed the nearby seawater red. In fact, this scene did not only happen on the coast. The leaders who had been prepared had also arranged people in the tribe to kill the prophets. However, even if they seized the initiative at the grand celebration, they could not disintegrate the huge influence of these prophets in the name of God on the tribe. An unprecedented war soon broke out on this continent. In just a dozen days, the powerful alliance of the broad-eyed beast tribes instantly fell apart and fell into a protracted civil war. The endless killing also gave birth to a huge amount of soul power. An unimaginably powerful energy was filling every corner of this continent. At this time, Lin En's action to condense the priesthood was also nearing its end. Chapter 638, Electromagnetic Priesthood and Mastering Strong Interaction. Crackling, the noisy and piercing thunder continued to resound over the ocean. In the center of the vast ocean, where the clouds were densest, a large number of positive and negative charges continued to gather. In an instant, a flash of lightning broke through the sky, illuminating the sky as if it were daytime. Then, lightning as thick as an adult's waist continued to strike from the sky, exploding waves on the turbulent sea. A huge amount of seawater evaporated and dissociated into diffuse mist under the terrifying high-temperature electric current. Millions of fish died on this spot in the entire sea area, and their bodies turned up from under the sea, forming a spectacle of floating corpses on the sea surface. At the same time, it also attracted more carnivorous fish to gather here, and then continued the cycle under the power of thunder. Obviously, the fish in the New World have not yet developed the instinct to actively avoid thunderstorms in the short evolution process. If it were a normal thunderstorm, it would not cause such terrible damage at all. But these falling lightnings were not formed naturally, but some energy that escaped when the priesthood was condensed. This is why Lin En chose to condense the priesthood here. At first, he was able to control it and only conduct experiments on a small area of the sea surface, trying not to affect the reproduction and survival of the creatures on the planet. However, as time went on, the priesthood gradually formed, and the 1% energy emitted formed the thunderstorm weather that affected the entire continent. All Lin En could do was to speed up his actions again and complete this final step. First, Emperor's Law, Gauss's Law, Gauss's magnetic law, and Faraday's law. Lin En's mind moved, and the dense lightning around him turned into a large number of complicated and sophisticated formulas. These symbols and formulas continued to extend and soon covered the surrounding area. In the next moment, a large number of formulas began to simplify and gradually converge together, outlining 4 equations composed of letters and symbols. This is the Maxwell equations, the Ohm's law, Biot-Savart's law, Electric field energy formula. All the formulas related to electricity and magnetism were separated from the Olympic mathematics priesthood by Lin En to create the Thunder priesthood, or it would be more appropriate to describe it as the electromagnetic priesthood. A few days later, the new priesthood was formed. It took more than 10 years and many detours. Although he now has 3 priesthoods, the priesthood of the dead was forcibly snatched, and the priesthood of the arcane was attached when he was promoted. The relevant experience is almost zero, and he can only try it bit by bit. Similarly, Lin En also found that even if he separated the electromagnetic formula from the priesthood of the arcane, the connection between the two still exists and has not been completely cut off. Electromagnetism is like a secondary priesthood extending from the priesthood of the arcane, and the two maintain a very subtle connection. This made Lin En think of the memory of Diana, the god of the moon, that the main god can construct an entire pantheon. Is this the construction method? Then should we divide a physics department and a chemistry department? While Lin En was thinking, he did not stop the movement of his hands. The experiment with interest played the role of the electromagnetic priesthood. First of all, his control over the electromagnetic force was greatly strengthened. Controlling the magnetic field of the planet is as simple as eating and drinking water. He can even directly control the magnetic field of the organism itself and exterminate all living things in the world. However, what Lin En values most is the influence at the microscopic level, such as the weak nuclear force and the strong nuclear force. The so-called strong nuclear force is the strong interaction, which is a force that can act on quarks. It is it that overcomes the repulsion between microscopic particles and forcibly binds protons and neutrons together to form the nucleus. The weak nuclear force is the opposite. It can make quarks repel each other and promote the fission and decay of atoms. Before obtaining the electromagnetic priesthood, Lin En could only barely perceive these two forces acting on the microscopic level. When making neutron clusters, he also relied on the more primitive high-speed impact method. But now it is different. He can clearly perceive the interaction between the two basic forces inside an atom. Dozens of plans flashed through Lin En's mind, and then he stretched out his hand. The free elements in the surrounding air were immediately decomposed into basic particles, and countless protons and neutrons gathered in his palm. Immediately afterwards, Lin En did not try to shorten the distance between neutrons by brute force as before, but instead prepared to increase the range of the strong interaction force. This is undoubtedly a crazy and incredible idea. What if the range of the strong interaction force suddenly becomes larger than the range of the repulsive force between microscopic particles? In that entire area, all matter will attract each other and bind tightly together. It is even possible that the mass of the collection will collapse and turn into a black hole because of the exaggeration. It is not easy to do this. After a simple experiment, Lin En soon discovered that the electromagnetic priesthood can indeed affect the strong nuclear force, but the divine power consumed will increase year on year for every doubling of its range. Lin En had no choice but to think about eliminating the electromagnetic repulsion and prepared to take a two-pronged approach. After a lot of trouble, the critical point was finally broken through. The elementary particles gathered in the palm of the hand no longer ran around aimlessly, but collided and pressed together like magnets that attracted each other. An extremely small neutron group was soon formed. Of course, Lin En was not satisfied with this. The air contained too little matter. With a thought, a huge amount of seawater rose from the sea level and poured into the palm of the hand continuously. The area near the palm has been specially treated. The repulsive force between particles has become very weak, and the range of strong interaction has increased by hundreds of times. In other words, Lin En does not need to do anything extra. All the substances entering this area cannot maintain a stable atomic form and will gather together spontaneously. Being able to do such an exaggerated thing is not only because of the help of the electromagnetic priesthood, but more importantly, Lin En has made a breakthrough again, from medium divine power to strong divine power. On the one hand, this is due to the previous accumulation and the blessing of the electromagnetic priesthood, and on the other hand, It is because of the powerful energy transformed from the souls of hundreds of billions of intelligent creatures who died in the continent under his feet in the past 10 years. It must be said that the biological transformation technology of the geometric civilization is too powerful. It has created this nearly perfect ranch. In just a dozen years, it is enough to compare with the evolution of natural planets for thousands of years. If there are 10 such stars of life, Lin En is even sure that he can be promoted again in a few years and become a god with great divine power. Chapter 639 Return to the macrocosm and the concept of artificial black holes. A huge amount of seawater rushed up like a tornado, and was constantly sucked into the area of about 70 centimeters in the palm of the hand. It was like a bottomless vortex that swallowed everything. In the past 10 days, billions of tons of seawater were pumped in, and the entire vast sea level dropped by about 3 meters. These substances were compressed into a sphere with a diameter of only about 1 cubic centimeter. The terrifying density was comparable to the matter inside a neutron star, and the surrounding space even showed a very obvious distortion. Even light seemed to be slow in this area, and its strong gravity caused the path of light to deviate. Is this the limit? Lin En quickly stopped absorbing seawater because he found that the compression of matter by relying on strong interaction force had reached its limit, and creating a small neutron star was not his purpose. What Lin En really wanted to create was an ultra-small black hole. At his level, the enemies he needed to face were very powerful. All the trump cards he had in the past were meaningless in front of the Lord God. So it has been confirmed that the black hole that can harm the Lord God level existence is the next killer move he prepared for himself. Only with this card can I officially have the power to communicate with geometric civilization and the main world on an equal footing. At first, Lin En's plan was to create an ultra-high density material aggregate and let it collapse naturally to become a black hole. This method is feasible to a certain extent, because there are many black holes in the universe, and some massive black holes are also formed by the collapse of neutron stars. Unfortunately, judging from the current situation, the compression of matter by the strong interaction force is not as strong as he expected. If you want to rely on this method to continuously increase matter until its gravity is increased to the level that can completely break the interval between neutrons, and even crush microscopic particles and transform them into black holes, the required mass is very large. I am afraid that even if you stuff all the matter of the entire planet under your feet, it may not be enough. Maybe you have to work on the dimension. Lin En kept pondering, and soon he had some new ideas. But it is obviously not appropriate to experiment here. Lin En looked around. Although he had stopped pumping seawater, the impact was not so easy to eliminate. A huge vortex formed in the center of the ocean, which might last for several years before it completely subsided. In addition, the energy released when the priesthood was condensed created thunderstorm clouds covering the entire continent, worsening the living environment of the animals and plants on this continent. For this, Lin En was also somewhat helpless. His current strength was too strong for the creatures on the planet. A slight move could cause a world-destroying disaster. Next time, it would be better to find an empty and desolate planet to experiment. While thinking, Lin En activated the electromagnetic priesthood to eliminate the gathered thunderstorm clouds, and then sent down the sweet rain to restore the vitality of the earth. As for the rise and fall of the protagonist of this continent, the broad-eyed beast tribe, Lin En saw it all, but he was busy breaking through the rain condensation priesthood before, so he didn't have much time to pay attention to it, and now he was not prepared to interfere. The other party believed in him purely because he accidentally witnessed the scene of him creating the sun. Lin En still admired the first batch of broad-eyed beast prophets. In order to see the truth of the world, they were willing to sacrifice their eyes, and they were willing to die in the morning. However, under the iteration and corruption of power, the subsequent prophets obviously no longer had such a spirit, and they used theocracy to satisfy their own selfish desires in the name of God. For example, the monopoly of magic power. The study of magic has nothing to do with whether you believe in God, and you don't need to sacrifice your eyes. Lin En has never sent down any oracles, but based on the protection of their own rights, the prophets of the broad-eyed beasts still maintain this bad habit and give it a sacred name. In fact, even if there is no scene of 3 days in the sky, The broad-eyed beast tribe will soon or later develop the idea of believing in gods. This is the path that any intelligent creature needs to go through in the process of understanding the world. Therefore, whether it is the spread of faith or the resistance of the broad-eyed beast leaders to theocracy, Lin En has no intention of interfering, and everything goes with the flow. He did not rely on the belief in the method of becoming a god to be promoted. The belief of intelligent creatures is like chicken ribs to him. Therefore, Lin En will not treat them differently just because they are his believers. All creatures on this planet have been defined since the moment of transformation, which is why Lin En named this place Planet Ranch. This is indeed a bit cruel, but the Parliament is far from being able to show kindness in the extra-galactic system. Endless fraternity will only bring endless troubles and greater destruction. The intelligence level of the broad-eyed beast is one level lower than that of humans. It can think, communicate and even form a large tribe, but it is limited to this. Without a miracle, it is very difficult to even form a country, not to mention the development of technology. It is actually not much different from the underground dog-headed man. If they regard the broad-eyed beast as a group of equal communication, what about the other magic beasts that also have some intelligence? This concept can be extended almost unlimitedly. There are also primates, various large creatures with high intelligence, magic beasts, and insects, microorganisms and even plants extending downward. Although their current level of technology and magic can completely transform a planet, and for ordinary creatures on the planet, they are no different from the Creator, but in the universe, no. Even in this galaxy, they are still nothing, and they are still facing considerable threats. Perhaps one day, when their magic level is enough to ignore all threats, they can consider creating a cosmic community. But at least now they need some more radical means. It's time to end it. Lin En looked at the sky above his head, the boundless quantum sea. Unknowingly, they have been here for more than 10 years. It is difficult to complete the accumulation from powerful divine power to great divine power with the resources of a single planet, and it is not easy to conduct various divine arts experiments here. So it is time to return to the universe. Under Lin En's manipulation, the four-dimensional coordinates of planet 1700 returned to their original positions, and the three little suns were also taken back. It can be predicted that the reappearance of the stars in the night sky and the disappearance of the sun will most likely cause an uproar in the broad-eyed beast tribe, and perhaps even a large number of new myths and legends will be created. However, these have nothing to do with Lin En. He took a step forward and entered the Planetary Ecology Research Institute. Chapter 640. The Special Gift and the Terror of Geometric Civilization. Lord Mooney, we seem to have returned to the galaxy numbered 1700. In the Planetary Ecology Research Institute, the sudden changes in the outside world quickly attracted the attention of a group of geometric stars. Manager Mooney had naturally noticed this. In fact, when Lin En dispersed the thunderstorm clouds and took back the three suns, he had already guessed it. It seems that the experiment conducted by the Magic Empire on this planet should be completed. Manager Mooney glanced at the research report sorted out on the table. After more than 10 years of research and testing, he has vaguely guessed the reason why the other party made such a big scene, that is, to conduct derivative experiments on the strange energy of magic. According to the detection of the energy collection and detection device, the concentration of magic in this planet has increased several times compared to more than 10 years ago. Judging from the growth curve, the growth rate during the large-scale war period is the fastest. Combined with Lin En's previous biological transformation requirements of fast iteration, short life, and high wisdom, Manager Mooney can almost be sure that the derivative of magic energy is related to the death of living beings. In addition, the characteristics of magic that can affect time, space, and dimensions also make Manager Mooney once again raise his evaluation of this special energy. After realizing that they had returned to the universe, the Administrator Mooney had only one thought left in his mind, which was how to send some of the magic power he secretly stored back to the Mother World. However, this thought was soon put away by the Administrator Mooney, because with a flash of light and shadow, Lin En's figure appeared in front of everyone. "How is your research going? What have you gained? Lin En asked casually. The information about the physical changes of creatures on the planet under the influence of magic power is basically here. The administrator Mooney handed over a fingernail-sized chip, which also contained some research data related to magic power. In the past 10 years, while they were trying to eliminate the impact of natural disasters caused by someone and balance the ecology, they also took the time to do some research experiments on magic power, most of which could not be hidden from the surveillance of Herve and others. Of course, some more critical experiments and conjectures were not recorded in the form of any data, but stored in his mind. Lin En was naturally aware of the little thoughts of the administrator Money, although he had previously focused his energy on condensing the electromagnetic priesthood and breaking through. This was his divine domain after all. As long as he wanted, anything that happened inside could not be hidden from his perception. In fact, letting these geometric people study magic was the result of Lin En's deliberate indulgence. So after reading the information, he skipped this topic and asked when the next batch of Element 7 could be delivered. Just one planetary pasture obviously could not satisfy Lin En's appetite. The last compensation sent by the geometric civilization totaled about 200 tons of Element 7. After low-dimensional expansion, it was barely enough to wrap a planet with a diameter of about 30,000 to 40,000 kilometers. There was another 300 tons of compensation that the other party had been delaying and not delivering. However, even if all of it was delivered, it might not be enough. Thinking of this, Lin En turned to mention that the researchers of the Magic Empire were very interested in Element 7 and might consider trading and purchasing it through other means in the future. The administrator Money was terrified after hearing these words. After seeing the power of Lin's manipulation of dimensions, his evaluation of the technology of the Magic Empire was raised to the cosmic level. The geometry civilization might not be able to compete with it. It also had the resources that the other party wanted, which was undoubtedly a dangerous signal. By the way, you can have someone take this thing back. It's a gift for the geometry civilization. Lin stretched out his hand, holding a ball with a diameter of about 1 centimeter on his fingertips. This thing was exactly the neutron ball that Lin had spent several days binding with strong interaction. Although Lin felt a little regretful that he failed to turn it into a black hole, the efforts of several days should not be in vain, right? So he simply gave it away as a gift. Money took the ball that looked like a marble. The moment he held it in his hand, he felt light, or it was weightless at all. The surface was smooth and flawless, like a perfect mirror, reflecting everything around it. Some kind of weapon made of neutrons? Money immediately realized this. The offensive weapons used by the geometry civilization fleet included neutron beams, so Money naturally recognized it quickly. However, compared to the nanometer scale diameter of the neutron beam, this sphere is much larger, and it is very light in the hand. It should be the use of some anti-gravity technology. With solid technical reserves, Money analyzed it in just a few seconds. However, he knew that since the neutron sphere was a gift specially sent by the interstellar governor of the Magic Empire, it would not be as simple as he imagined. With Lin En's permission, Money used quantum communication to send a communication signal for the first time in more than 10 years. On the other side, the disk leaders of the Mother World had just received the information that the disappeared planet number 1700 had reappeared. While analyzing it, they received the signal sent by Money and hurriedly established communication. The administrator Money had no intention of hiding anything. After successfully establishing communication, he told everything that had happened in the past 10 years and sent back some of the information in the form of quantum information. Looking at the data transmitted back, all the leaders of the disk were in shock. Although they guessed that the small matter of planet 1700 must be related to the dimension, they did not expect that the Magic Empire actually transferred an entire planet to the high-dimensional area. The time flow rate is 10 times faster, which can directly affect an entire planet. It is not even certain whether this is the limit of what the other party can do. Many leaders have the same idea as the manager Money. The Magic Empire is very likely to be a cosmic civilization. Lin En's interest in Element 7 also made him worried. Some leaders thought that it was a complete mistake to give Element 7 away. However, some leaders of the disk thought that this was not a bad thing. Since the other party proposed a deal, they might as well ask the other party to give some technologies that the geometric civilization urgently needs, such as the method of making the curvature engine, to speed up their scientific research process. Is this impossible? Just as the leaders of the disc were arguing about whether to make this deal and what they needed to ask for in exchange, a sudden exclamation suddenly resounded throughout the venue, interrupting everyone's discussion. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 641, Destroying Geometric Civilization is as easy as slapping a bug to death. This is impossible. A sudden exclamation interrupted the discussion of the crowd. The speaker was a cutting-edge researcher from the geometry civilization. After establishing communication with the mother world, the administrator Money, with the permission of Lin En, sent the neutron ball through the wormhole technology. The leaders of the disk naturally attached great importance to this gift from the Magic Empire, so they immediately sent people to test it. It turned out that the material of this thing was nothing special. It was just a larger neutron group, which could be made with the current technology of the geometry civilization with some effort. The only thing worth mentioning was the anti-gravity technology of the outer layer, which allowed ordinary carbon-based creatures to hold this neutron ball with a mass comparable to a giant peak in their hands and play with it without being crushed to death. So they directly summoned the cutting-edge researchers in the geometry civilization to study it. Are there any new discoveries? The Supreme Leader attached great importance to it. He did not think it was just a gift. Since it was sent by the interstellar governor, it must have a deeper meaning. The researchers in charge of the test were very excited. The range of the strong nuclear force in this neutron ball reaches a full 500 times the atomic distance. As soon as this was said, the geometry people present were all shocked. Although some of the leaders of the disk were not scientific researchers, they were able to directly instill information through the optical brain after genetic modification, so they were very clear about the common sense knowledge such as the range of the strong nuclear force, which is usually between 1 atomic distance and 1/10,000th of an atomic distance, and this atomic distance is a distance unit derived from the diameter of the smallest hydrogen atom in the atomic sequence. Similarly, the time unit used by the geometry civilization, the atomic second, is also determined by the natural energy level transition frequency of the hydrogen element. In this way, the trouble caused by different time units when communicating with different civilizations is avoided. Even for weak planetary civilizations, the atomic second is a fixed value that can be easily measured. So the technology of the Magic Empire can directly affect the strong nuclear force itself. The tone of the Supreme Leader was extremely solemn, and the electromagnetic waves emitted were intermittent. The geometry civilization can also create neutron balls, but to put it bluntly, it is just the application of the laws of the universe, by forcibly shortening the distance between protons or neutrons, so that they can be closely combined. This is how the atomic nuclei in nature are formed, and they are just replicating this process, relying on the power of the law itself. The other party's approach involves the change of the law itself. Even if it is only the most basic increase in the range of strong interactions, it also proves that the Magic Empire has the ability to directly manipulate the strong nuclear force. This means that their proud reliance, artificial black holes, may not be as deterrent as previously expected. A civilization that has studied the dimensions and can manipulate the strong nuclear force is very likely to also have the ability to create and defend against black hole attacks. As for why it was not used in the previous war, there are many possibilities, and the most desperate one is the beast fighting theory. The battle with the geometry civilization fleet may be just an experiment to test the combat effectiveness of high-dimensional biological weapons in the eyes of the Magic Empire, just like a beast fight in the arena. As long as the victory is achieved in the end, the owner will naturally not intervene in person. Gift. The Supreme Leader stared at the neutron ball placed in the center of the conference hall and held by a researcher. He suddenly understood why the other party gave this thing to Money and asked him to return it after proposing to buy the seventh element. This was clearly to reassure them. The seventh element is the treasure of the geometry civilization. When the other party proposed to use it as compensation, some leaders strongly opposed it, thinking that handing over this trump card was an extremely stupid decision. You must know that according to those cutting-edge researchers, the potential of the seventh element has not been developed yet. If this trump card is kept, it may not be impossible to surpass it with a technological explosion in thousands of years. Once it is handed over, the magic empire that has learned the secret of the seventh element will become more difficult to deal with, and may even destroy them in order to obtain more of the seventh element. Now these leaders don't have this idea, because the technology displayed by the other party is too terrible. 10 times the time flow speed means that without a miracle, the geometry civilization will never have the possibility of defeating the other party. As for the gift sent by the other party, the meaning is also very obvious. With the current technological level of the magic empire, destroying the geometry civilization is as easy as slapping a bug to death. If they conduct trading wisely and satisfy the magic empire's interest in the seventh element, they can continue to maintain peace. If they don't, it will lead to a catastrophe. In a sense, this is indeed the best gift. Supreme Leader, I have another thing to report. Seeing that the conference hall fell into a long silence, Money carefully said that he had secretly stored some magic power. He originally wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to open the wormhole and send it back together, but doing so is very risky. If they are discovered, it means that they have stolen important strategic information. The geometry people who stayed on planet 1700 will not only be killed, but also may cause a war between the two civilizations. Without the confirmation of the mother world, he naturally did not have the courage to take this risk. Hearing that Money had successfully obtained a part of the magic power, the leaders of the discs present were a little jealous. The special nature of magic power can be seen from the information transmitted before. It is definitely a more advanced energy source than the seventh element. Even the dimensional technology of the magic empire is mostly related to magic power. You should have been more decisive. This time, opening the wormhole is clearly the best opportunity. The leader of the disc, which is similar to an ellipse, said with regret, "It is impossible to hide the opening of a wormhole in the planet from the magic empire. So this gift may be the only opportunity." In the end, it was a pity that Money gave up because of his hesitation, but after all, it has been missed. In addition, it involves the survival of civilization. Such a major choice is not something that everyone dares to make. It is really not Money's fault. After discussing for a while, someone soon proposed a second plan, which is to take advantage of the opportunity of the next handover in compensation to transport this part of the magic power out. Chapter 642 The Second Star God of the Council. Wouldn't it be too dangerous? A leader of the disc said hesitantly. The handover of compensation was indeed an opportunity to secretly transport magic power, but the risk was also great. If the other party had any magic detection device and it was found out, it would be difficult to deal with. From the intelligence collected, the geometry civilization did not have the possibility to compete with the other party. Once they became enemies, the consequences would be unimaginable. The Supreme Leader was also considering this issue concerning the survival of civilization. Now they have finally maintained a relatively friendly relationship with the Magic Empire. If they rashly get involved in magic power, such an important energy, it is likely to break the situation they have painstakingly created. But magic power is too important. It is related to the possibility of geometry civilization's promotion to a cosmic civilization. What's more important is that Money has discovered a method to derive this thing. As long as they can send this part of magic power back, they can continuously obtain this energy. Didn't the interstellar governor say that he wanted to obtain more element 7 through trade? Perhaps we can directly propose an exchange. As a researcher of dimension and spacetime, Ita made a wild proposal, but it attracted ridicule. The leaders thought it was simply a fantasy. Such strategic energy would not be easily handed over by any civilization. It would not only be a waste of effort, but also expose their desire to obtain magic power. Once the magic empire was prepared, it would be more difficult for them to transport magic power out. However, Ita didn't think so. If magic power was really so important, The other party would not let money participate in this experiment. He thought that magic power was a top-secret energy and could never be used for trading. It was just a fantasy of low-dimensional civilizations like them. After considering for a long time, the supreme leader finally made a decision. First, money would indirectly propose the request to exchange Element 7 for magic power. If the other party refused sternly without leaving any room for maneuver, then they would consider using other means. Although it was obvious that the probability of the interstellar governor agreeing was very small, they could take this opportunity to test the attitude of the magic empire towards magic as an energy source, so that they could prepare in advance for the consequences of being discovered smuggling magic. While Money and the leaders of the Mother World were secretly discussing how to obtain magic, in the New World, on a deliberately vacated continent, Lin En was testing the development results of the past decade. Since the 500,000 atomic-level detectors placed by the geometry civilization on this planet have been reversed by themselves, and since they have entered the quantum sea, the detectors from outside the system cannot capture the movements here, so Vittorio and others can rest assured to do various research here. What those geometry people can see depends entirely on their own control. These 10 years have not been wasted. They directly dismantled all the technological creations left by the geometry people on this planet, and focused on the improvement and research of warships, as well as the sorting out of previous knowledge systems. It has to be said that since Lin En arrived at the land of wizards, magic science has made a leap in a very short time. That is, the wizards have good brains and strong learning ability to accept this change. Now they finally have time to consolidate and sort it out. While doing research, several legendary speakers did not neglect the most important thing, that is, the improvement of strength. Anthony, Raphael and others have been promoted from the 7th ring wizard to the 8th ring. Vittorio and Aurora, who have completed the promotion before, are on the verge of another breakthrough. Herv has become the first legendary wizard to be promoted to the 9th ring. Although he has just broken through and his accumulation is very limited, it also means that he has the possibility of further progress. This makes Vittorio somewhat regretful. He was the first person to break through the legend, but now Herv has taken the lead. Congratulations, Speaker Herv. It seems that in a short time, the Parliament will have a 2nd star god-level combat power. Lin En congratulated sincerely. Unlike Hela, who was a one-man show and persecuted other competitors, Lin En was only happy about Herv's promotion. There were plenty of resources in the universe, and the dangers faced were far beyond the ability of a star god to deal with. Even if the other party made a breakthrough, they were still on the same front, and they would not be like the gods in the main world, who were hostile to each other for the sake of faith and fought to death. And the thing about gods, although it sounds very high-end, is actually a starship-level combat power. According to the geometry civilization, such high-dimensional life forms are at most rare in the universe. If it was not the Lord God but himself who faced the fleet of geometry civilization, he might have been captured and studied now. However, only Lin En did not care much about the identity of this god. For Herv, he had been so excited that he had not rested for several months and had been discussing the promotion plan with several speakers. With such a successful case as Lin En to pave the way, Herv was naturally very confident. In addition to the star of life under his feet, the geometry civilization also compensated 2 other planets, which were enough as a bargaining chip for promotion. If you want to break through the legend and become a star god, accumulation alone is not enough. You are still missing a very key thing: Godhead. Lin En shook his head and poured cold water on the excited Herv. The brows of the legendary speakers present frowned immediately. Ella was fine, because she got Diana's Godhead, but they remembered that when Lin En broke through, he didn't have the Godhead. Lin En naturally saw the doubts of the crowd, shrugged and answered, "My Godhead is based on the special creation brain of the Secret Law Society, and the magic network system also uses this as a trace, but the material used to make it comes from a special substance in a meteorite, which is difficult to replicate." Whether it is him or Ella, the reason why they were able to complete the ascension ceremony in a very short time is that they got this key thing first. Ella therefore inherited Diana's priesthood and became the goddess of the moon. As for himself, Perhaps because of the massive amount of data stored in the brain based on formulas, he directly obtained the priesthood of the Olympiad. But before he could get anxious, Lin En said that he already had some ideas about the creation of a godhead. He was considering using element 7 as the core and combining it with quantum computer technology to create one. Chapter 643, Bring the entire geometric civilization under our control. How sure are you? Hearing that Lin En had a way to make a godhead, Zhou's eyes suddenly lit up and he hurriedly asked, "About 70%. Lin En didn't dare to say it too firmly. Although he had a specific idea, he had to try it first to know. Anthony, Vittorio, Aurora and others were also very concerned about this. After more than 10 years of accumulation, they were not far from breaking through the realm and becoming a legendary wizard of the 9 rings. If he can successfully complete the ascension ceremony, then the next one might be himself." The speakers were about to ask for more details when they were interrupted by an electromagnetic wave transmission. It was an emergency communication sent by Sanchez, who was responsible for monitoring those geometric stars. The content was very simple. Money. The administrator, who had just finished communicating with the mother world, asked to meet with Lin En, the interstellar governor of the Magic Empire. It was said that there was something very important to discuss. What do they want to do this time? Vittorio couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Although these geometry people have been behaving well over the past decade, Vittorio did not relax his vigilance. Lin En smiled and answered, "The geometry civilization is planning to exchange element 7 for some magic substances. If they can't exchange them, they will have to find a way to smuggle them. Of course, money would not be so stupid as to tell Raphael so directly, but the entire planet is Lin En's divine domain." In other words, this communication was carried out inside his body, and Lin En could naturally see the communication information between money and geometry civilization. As for the advanced information protection technology of geometry civilization, that thing only protects against technology but not magic, or to be more specific, in the other party's cognition, magic is just a kind of energy, and the Magic Empire has mastered the technology to use this special energy. Just like producing and using electricity. It is impossible to imagine that he is actually electricity itself. They think it's a good idea. Proof sneered. Anthony and others were a little worried. They did not agree with Lin En's letting these geometry people participate in the planetary ranch plan before, because this would inevitably leak information about magic. Even if there is a need to use the technology of geometry civilization, they can forcibly ask for it or requisition some scientific and technological instruments through other means. There is no need to risk leaking magic power. However, things have already happened, and several people can't blame Lin En for being too relaxed. They are thinking about how to refuse him so that he can give up this unrealistic idea. Raphael even suggested that many and other geometry people be imprisoned directly to prevent them from secretly trying to get magic power. However, Lin En's answer was beyond everyone's expectations. "Of course we have to give it. Since geometry civilization wants to trade, why don't we agree? Element 7 is exactly what the parliament lacks, isn't it?" Lin En said casually. Although the compensation given by geometry civilization is 500 tons of element 7, it is not enough to build the planetary ranch, but also to consider the production of the godhead. That's why he specifically proposed a trade. In addition to magic power, the parliament may not be able to give what the other party wants. "Are you crazy?" Zhou's eyes widened, and he couldn't help but rebuked. Aurora, Anthony, Sanchez and others were also shocked. They really couldn't understand Lin En's brain circuit. He actually gave away the trump card and support of the parliament. This is simply the behavior of a madman. You deliberately left those geometric stars and let them join the plan of the planet ranch. Is it for this? Vittorio was relatively calm. As long as he thought about what Lin En had done in recent years, he would realize that trading magic power was not a random decision made on a whim, but a long-term layout. But for a while, Vittorio couldn't figure out why the other party wanted to do this. Lin En didn't answer directly, but asked, "In your opinion, what is magic power?" Vittorio paused, and Herve and others frowned and pondered for a while. and then Anthony took the lead in speaking. Magic power is a special energy source from another universe. It can be affected by mental power, manipulate various basic particles in the universe, and can also affect time and space. Anthony said all the characteristics of magic power that the Parliament had studied in a relatively concise manner. It is not easy to answer Lin En's question, from the perspective of magic. To explain what a thing is, you need to summarize all its basic characteristics such as its origin, composition, production method, etc. For example, water, you can vaguely say that it is the source of life, a colorless and odorless transparent liquid. Or you can say that it is an inorganic substance composed of two elements, hydrogen and oxygen. But this is just the most superficial thing. If you go deeper, you need to explain what the basic particles that make up the hydrogen and oxygen elements are, why the chemical equation is H2O, instead of other proportions, and why these two elements can form water. When it comes to deeper things, they can only be described by the laws of the universe for the time being. According to their speculation, magic power is likely to be one of the most microscopic basic particles, involving higher dimensions, so it can exist in various forms. Of course, Lin En did not mean to embarrass them, but reminded them, don't forget, the magic power on this planet is not ownerless, it is also a part of me. Geometric civilization studies and uses magic power, which is equivalent to studying and using their own power. Lin En can even manipulate the research results obtained by the other party to a certain extent. You mean to use the research and use of magic power by geometry civilization to influence and control them in turn. Prov understood what Lin En meant instantly, but still felt that this idea was unreliable. This is undoubtedly a very dangerous plan. If you are not careful, it may get out of control. If the technological level of geometry civilization exceeds expectations and completely cracks the secret of magic power, then it will be over. I have tried this. Lin En is very clear about the concerns of Prov and others. In fact, this is exactly what he is worried about. That's why he took the initiative to let money and others stay, acquiescing to the other party's research on magic power, and repeatedly passing information to the mother world, just to confirm whether geometry civilization has this ability. Compared with the risks they need to take, the benefits are also greater. If they operate well enough, they may be able to bring the entire geometry civilization under their control in one go. Chapter 644, Ways to Break Through the Black Hole Blockade. After Lin's explanation, all the speakers present began to think about the pros and cons, and were shocked by Lin's wild idea. They were naturally aware of the idea of the geometry star people to achieve energy ascension and get rid of the limitations of the flesh. They mentioned it in many communications between money and the mother world. If the other party uses magic as the foundation to achieve this, it is equivalent to putting life and death under Lin's control. And if the Parliament can replicate the other party's energy transformation technology and use it to transform tens of millions of people on the entire eternal star, thinking of this, Prov shuddered. He couldn't imagine how terrible a civilization composed entirely of legends would be. Aurora, Anthony and others obviously thought of this. Just like what Lin said, this is indeed a decision with both risks and benefits. On the contrary, Vittorio still has some concerns. He thinks it is not necessary to take such a risk. As long as they continue to maintain the status quo, they will always be able to surpass the geometric civilization in 30 or 50 years. Or at least gain the ability to compete head-on with the other party. It will not be too late to carry out this plan at that time. After developing the dimensional magic that manipulates the flow of time, time is on their side. The longer it drags on, the better it is for the Parliament. Lin En shook his head and broke Vittorio's fantasy. The geometric civilization is indeed frightened by us now. But you don't think the threat from the main world has disappeared? Although the invasion from the main world has been repelled by them with the help of the power of the geometric civilization, and the opened space-time gate has been blocked by the black hole, but Lin En knows very well that all this is temporary. As long as he gives himself more time, Lin En is fully confident that he can replicate the artificial black hole technology of the geometric civilization. Even he can do such a thing. Then the main god, who is much stronger than himself, will probably not be bluffed and can always think of a solution. Not to mention, The last war was not a complete victory for the geometry civilization, but it seized a rare opportunity and took advantage of the main god's body stuck between the two worlds to launch a sneak attack, which made it impossible for the other party to avoid it, so it was temporarily repelled. Once the gods of another main world invade again, whether they can cope with it is one thing, but more importantly, the previous lies are likely to be exposed, and then they may have to face sieges from both sides. Passive attacks are not Lin En's character. He prefers to take the initiative and eliminate threats in advance. In this case, we can only do what you want. Vittorio no longer objected. He did neglect the threat from another universe. It can only be said that it has been too quiet over there recently, but in the final analysis, it is because they have completely lost the channel to obtain news from the main world after giving up the divine domain. The quieter it is, the more likely it is to brew a greater threat. After reaching a consensus on action with everyone, Lin En prepared to meet money. Even though they have decided to agree to this deal, they cannot be so casual in the negotiation. They must embarrass the other party before considering agreeing, so as not to make the geometry civilization suspicious. Thanks to eavesdropping on the discussion between money and the leaders of the disk, Lin En knew the other party's bottom line in advance, which was a 1,000-to-1 exchange. And this bottom line seemed to be able to be further lowered. In the endless void, in the Pantheon, more than 100 gods have been here for several months. The three main gods have joined forces to try to use the space-time gate created before to directly blow up the black hole blocking the door. Failed again. Seeing the space-time gate surging in the void return to calm again, the god of life and creation shook his head silently. This was the fourth attempt this month. Although the gods waiting in the Pantheon did not say anything, they also had their own little thoughts. It was the first time they saw that the main gods also had something they couldn't solve. The Lord God Meregs looked unhappy. With their strength, if they could exert their full power, it would not be difficult to solve a small black hole, but they could not descend into the universe with their true bodies. With only the little power they extended, it was difficult to resist the terrifying attraction of the black hole. Even the opened space-time wormhole itself was inevitably affected. The volume was reduced by 2/3 compared to before. It is expected that it will disappear completely in another half a year. We can't wait any longer. This is also the reason why Meregs was eager to break through the blockade and tried several times in a month. It seems impossible to deal with this huge source of gravity across the boundary wall. It's better to change another method. Another Lord God pondered and suggested. Their original plan was to work together to solve the black hole on the opposite side and then continue to expand the space-time gate. After all, this was the space-time channel they had built with great difficulty. Without the coordinate of Ella, there was no way to enter the other side's world from other places in a short time. It's a pity that the attempts over the past few months have obviously failed. Fortunately, the efforts during this period were not completely in vain. At least they had mastered the key information such as the strength and coverage of the huge gravitational source. Since it was difficult to destroy the huge gravitational source directly, it would be better to find a way to escape the capture of gravity. This would be much easier to implement. The three of them should be able to allow a god to safely pass through the coverage of the gravitational source and open the space-time gate in other safer places. The only problem was that the fleet of those wizards was very likely to be guarding the other side of the space-time gate. Even if they successfully broke through the capture of the gravitational source, it would still be very dangerous. You know, last time they made full preparations and sent 6 gods to come at once, but the whole army was destroyed. Even the great god Harry could not escape. No one wanted to be this cannon fodder. The main god Maragos looked around at the gods who were hesitant because of fear and gathered in the Pantheon. He was somewhat disappointed. Just as he was about to speak directly to order someone, the god of life and creation suddenly stepped forward and spoke under the surprised eyes of the gods. "Why don't you let me do it? We have tried several times and all ended in failure. I guess they should have relaxed their vigilance now." The main god Meregus looked at the god of life and creation with appreciation. Someone volunteered, which was much better than forcing them. Considering that life and creation were not good at fighting, Meregus took out a main artifact and handed it to the other party. It was a pity that the god of space had fallen. otherwise it would be safest for him to carry out the mission. Chapter 645. Even if this is a poisoned pie, we have to force ourselves to eat it. The negotiations with Mooney and others lasted for a full half-month before they were declared over. With the concerted efforts of all the speakers, they accurately grasped the psychology of the geometry civilization's eagerness to obtain magic power and reached an agreement to exchange 1,000 tons of element 7 for 10 kilograms of magic power. That's right. It's 10 kilograms of magic power. Although magic power is a kind of energy, it also has mass, but it is very light, so light that it can only be observed when the form is transformed. Because energy is actually the amount of matter, it is a more microscopic matter, which is why mass and energy can be converted into each other. They are essentially no different. For example, 1 kilogram of electricity can be easily calculated using the mass-energy formula. It is about 25 billion degrees, which can allow an interstellar spacecraft to sail for about an hour. After the negotiations were truly agreed upon, Mooney even wondered if he was dreaming. The interstellar governor actually agreed to the request to exchange element 7 for magic power. Although the negotiation process was very difficult and the final result exceeded the bottom line by 100 times, Mooney was still extremely satisfied. This meant that he didn't need to risk being killed to smuggle magic power, not to mention that this might cause a war between the two civilizations. After getting Lin's permission, Mooney couldn't wait to pass the good news back to the mother world. The leaders of the disk had no hope for the success of the transaction. They were discussing how to smuggle magic power out when the next compensation was paid. Now they suddenly learned that the other party actually agreed to exchange element 7 for magic power. They were shocked and speechless. Mooney hurriedly took credit, saying that it was his superb negotiation skills that convinced the interstellar governor to agree. However, this also represents a sad fact. The Magic Empire attaches great importance to magic power, a special energy source, but it is far from being as strictly guarded as they thought. It is a general confidentiality level, not a top-secret strategic material. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a single interstellar governor to make a decision. In addition, the Magic Empire is really interested in element 7, considering that they have the ability to control the speed of time. Mooney even suspects that their research on element 7 has reached a very deep level, and may even surpass the geometry civilization. Such a big gap makes the leaders of the disks feel desperate. At the same time, some geometry stars also questioned this. Even if magic power is not a top-secret energy source for the Magic Empire, it is still a bit strange to trade it rashly, because once this energy can be mastered and utilized, geometry civilization will inevitably usher in a technological explosion in just a few decades. From their contact and understanding, although the Magic Empire claims to be a high moral civilization, it is not like a truly selfless civilization that is willing to help lower civilizations and even share some basic technologies. Maybe it's because of element 7, a leader with an oval-shaped guest. Don't you think it's strange? Why did the Magic Empire suddenly appear in that star field, so close to the geometry civilization? According to the intelligence we have collected, the several planets in that star field have not been developed at all, so he suspected that the Magic Empire should have just arrived in that star system not long ago. It is likely that the other party's probe arrived there and accidentally discovered the exploration fleet that fell on the star system. They found the remnants of element 7 inside. After research, they were very interested in this new element, so they sent a signal to induce them to receive it, intending to obtain it through war. It was just that in that small war, they defeated the other party's high-dimensional war weapon with artificial black holes, a cutting-edge technology developed based on element 7, which made the Magic Empire hesitate. In addition, their almost humble attitude made the other party completely lose the excuse to start a war, and they agreed to the request for this transaction. The leader's wild guess was soon affirmed by many colleagues, but there were also many geometry people who opposed it. After all, there were a lot of loopholes in it. Assuming that the Magic Empire doesn't care much about magic power, which is an energy source that can be called heaven-defying, then why is it so interested in element 7? It's not possible that the potential of element 7 is more terrifying than magic power. Moreover, if the other party wants to obtain element 7, they can completely exchange it with other technologies. This is also the strategy they thought the Magic Empire would implement in the transaction at the beginning. There are too many places that don't make sense. We can't use the thinking method of geometric civilization to measure the thinking of an energy life form. The elliptical leader insisted that his guess must be correct, and the other party's brain circuit might be like this. Colorful electromagnetic waves kept flashing in the conference hall. The supreme leader was not affected by these disputes, but maintained the original decision and completed the transaction. Informed the interstellar governor that we are going to send the remaining 300 tons of compensation and the 1,000 tons of element 7 in the transaction directly through the wormhole. The supreme leader said with a final decision, since the deal has been made, there is no possibility of regret, otherwise it will most likely anger the other party. Not to mention that magic power is likely to be related to the promotion of cosmic civilization. Even if it is a poisoned pie, they have to force it to eat. On the other side, in the temporary station, Herve and others were also anxiously waiting for the reply from the geometry civilization. Although they have already made an agreement with money, the decision-makers of the geometry civilization can make the final decision. What is the situation now? Do those geometry stars have any doubts? Vittorio looked at Lin En on the side. He thought that the other party should have discussed it almost. Yes. Lin En nodded and then said with a smile, it's just that they probably still can't figure out why we agreed to the transaction request. Since the first meeting with the geometry civilization, Lin En has been creating the illusion that the Magic Empire is very powerful, and has strengthened this cognition many times since then. The other party should be convinced of this now. After all, they threw out real bait and demonstrated real technology to confuse the other party. If everything goes well this time, the planet ranch will not need to be expanded for the time being. Geometry civilization should be able to help us complete this. As for the creation of the Godhead, as Lin En was speaking, the smile on his face suddenly stopped and turned into a more serious one. He received a message from the eternal star that the black hole that the Parliament had been monitoring had a problem. Chapter 646 The Battle of Gods Outside the Black Hole. Lin En was not the only one who received the quantum communication. Vittorio and others also learned this heavy information at the same time. They didn't expect that Lin En's worries would come true so soon. Should we find a way to get the geometry civilization involved? Aurora suggested. Although the power of the Parliament is much stronger than before, and Lin En has made another breakthrough, it is still a fantasy to want to fight against the gods of the main world alone. The only chance of winning is to bring the geometry civilization in, but this requires a suitable reason, such as a rebellion in the Empire, so as to seek their help. No. It's better not to let the geometry civilization get involved in this matter. Lin En shook his head and rejected Aurora's proposal. They just proposed an agreement to exchange magic power for element 7, which has aroused the other party's suspicion. Now they say that there is trouble in the Magic Empire and even need the help of a low-level civilization to overcome the difficulties. It is easy for the other party to have some bad thoughts. Things should not be that bad. From the report, the black hole has not disappeared. This may just be an attempt or a tentative attack, Lin En said comfortingly. The wizard who was responsible for monitoring the black hole had reported several abnormalities of the space-time gate. Under the influence of the black hole, the size of the space-time gate kept shrinking, but there were also several times when it suddenly became larger in the opposite direction, and strange substances could be seen gushing out from the inside. Lin En guessed that it might be that the gods of the main world were experimenting on how to destroy or break through the attraction of the black hole. This time, they received a more urgent message. It was obviously not an ordinary situation. It was very necessary to go and see it in person. After some discussion, Raphael stayed here to contact the geometric civilization and exchange materials. The rest of the people rushed to support through the wormhole immediately. The distance between the two places is very far, about 50 light-years. Even at twice the speed of light, it would take a full 25 years to fly. Fortunately, they placed a detector on the battlefield last time, which could be used as a coordinate to open the wormhole. It only took less than 10 minutes. On the contrary, It took a full day and night to fly from the location of the detector to the Schwarzschild radius of the black hole. Dozens of warships of the Parliament had already been waiting here, surrounding it in a semicircle. However, it seems a bit ridiculous to say that they are surrounded, because under the huge horizon of the black hole, the warships are as small as floating dust. What's the situation? Lin En stepped into the temporary command room and asked directly without a word of nonsense. It has been nearly 30 hours since they received the intelligence, and the fleet deployed here for protection has not been completely destroyed, which is beyond Lin En's expectation. This is hard to say. The great wizard in charge of monitoring the operation showed hesitation and hurriedly told the whole story. After swallowing 6 gods and dozens of galaxy-class warships fueled by antimatter, the horizon of the black hole has expanded several times compared to the beginning, and the edge even touched the space-time gate and wrapped it in, because the attraction of the black hole is so strong that even light cannot escape. The internal situation cannot be seen from the outside. But this does not mean that they have no way to obtain information. According to the dimensional theory proposed by Lin En, they can directly infer what is happening inside by observing the changes in the gravitational waves of the black hole. The black hole is like a huge sphere placed on the elastic cloth, which will make the surrounding spacetime deeply concave. The spacetime gate on the periphery is to place a smaller sphere on the edge of the elastic cloth that is already concave, and the spacetime concave in that area will be more obvious than other places. In addition, the two gravitational sources will also affect each other. For example, they observed that the energy that maintains the spacetime gate is being sucked into the black hole continuously, and the volume is slowly shrinking. The previous reports were because the gravity of the spacetime gate was suddenly detected to be enhanced, and it was suspected that the gods on the other side were making trouble. However, the current situation is even stranger. A third gravitational source appeared inside the black hole's event horizon, and it is slowly moving outside the black hole's event horizon. The speed of this thing is not fast. When we detected it, it was several hours after the incident. According to the speed measurement, it will leave the event horizon radius of the black hole in about a day, the great wizard reported. Lin En pondered for a while and immediately guessed that it should be a god who crossed the line. A god made a full-strength attack, and the space-time force he triggered was also extremely powerful, enough to cause very obvious ripples in space-time at the edge. I just don't know which gods came. The most important thing is that the battle cannot last too long, and the scene should not be too big, otherwise it is likely to attract the attention of geometric civilizations. On the other side, the god of life and creation, who was carrying a heavy responsibility, was wandering on the edge of the black hole's horizon. It was pitch black here, even deeper than the endless void. Time and space seemed to have lost their meaning here, and there was no concept of up, down, left, and right. However, it was always right to move forward in the opposite direction of the gravitational vortex. When he first entered this world, he underestimated the strength of the black hole's gravity, and the god of life and creation was almost sucked in directly. Fortunately, the main artifact given to him by Maragos played a role at the critical moment, forming an anti-gravitational field around him, greatly reducing the impact of the black hole's gravitational vortex, and avoiding the tragedy of dying before achieving success. After flying for an unknown amount of time, perhaps a day, a week, or even half a month, light finally appeared in front of him. It was the light captured by the black hole from the outside world. This also meant that he was about to leave this damn place. The god of life and creation was not happy, because he knew that now was the most dangerous time. After about a few hours, the god of life and creation completely left the scope of the black hole's horizon, and what he saw was a brilliant sea of light, formed by the absorption and heating of the black hole, huge and eye-catching. A figure stood in the circle of light. Under the reflection of the huge halo, the figure seemed very blurry, but it exuded a strong sense of oppression. Lin En was somewhat surprised that there was only one god who entered the universe, and he was defeated by him at the beginning. But he also knew that since the other party dared to enter this universe, he must have something to rely on, and he was afraid that he would not be easy to deal with. He immediately raised the clustered element number 7 in his hand and setting differently, low dimension. Expand. Chapter 647 My name. Low dimensional. Expand. At the moment when Lin En finished speaking, the element 7 gathered in the palm of his hand expanded millions of times in an instant, covering everything around him. The previous few times when low-dimensional expansion was used were inside the planet, and the planet's own gravity and magnetic field could form a protective shield, but this time it was slightly different. It was in the universe, relying only on a thin layer of element 7 as a shield, and the outside world was a vast quantum sea. Choosing this place for the battle was naturally to avoid the surveillance of geometric civilization. The god of life and creation stared at Lin En in front of him, and was a little surprised. The last time he fought, he could still feel that the opponent's power was similar to his own. Both of them were medium-level divine power. Now the sense of oppression was far stronger than most of the gods he had seen, almost comparable to the great god Harry. But he was also prepared this time. At the same time when Lin En expanded the element 7, the god of life and creation took out the main artifact given by the Lord God Miragos. That was an eye. It was the size of a human head, with a dark golden hue throughout. Blood streaks spread around the pupils, making it look very ferocious and terrifying. Rather than saying that this was the main artifact, it was better to say that this was a part of the body of the main god Miragos. Just separated by a universe, the connection between the two had become very weak. My name is Augur, the ruler of life, the god of creation. Sound could not be transmitted in the void of the universe, but Augur's words seemed to penetrate the barrier of distance and rang directly in Lin En's mind. Under the power of life and creation, the eye the size of a human head also began to expand rapidly, and its size soon exceeded 100 meters. Strands of white feathers floated down from the void, and finally condensed into a pair of huge wings, and hidden under the white wings was a polymer made up of countless eyes. Augur was using the priesthood of creation to stimulate the power of this main artifact. Just as Lin En moved the battlefield to the quantum sea, the white wings suddenly spread out, and hundreds of thousands of terrifying lights of destruction bombarded down, covering the entire space covered by the seventh element. There was no possibility of escape. Even Lin En couldn't help but feel a chill. If he was hit by these lights of destruction, he might be in danger of falling. As his mind turned, a large number of elementary particles that were barely perceptible to the naked eye were arranged in front of Lin En under the trend of a certain force, forming a protective layer with a diameter of only about 1 millimeter. The neutron shield was blocking the way. As one of the hardest substances in the universe, neutrons are tens of billions of times stronger than steel. Under the action of the strong nuclear force, they are firmly locked together, like a wall blocking the way ahead. The most important thing is that its almost absolutely smooth surface can reflect light back very well. But these shattering lights are not just electromagnetic waves. Even such a powerful wall still collapsed layer by layer in front of hundreds of thousands of shattering lights. The neutrons hit by the light could not bear the huge energy at all and were directly shattered into more microscopic quarks. Not only that, the shattering lights that hit other directions directly punched a big hole in the protective shield composed of element 7, and the surging quantum tide immediately surged up. This is one of the most fundamental powers in the universe. Even if no one controls it, it can wipe out a legend from this world in an instant. Even gods find it difficult to stay here for a long time. Fortunately, these hundreds of thousands of shattering lights are not completely directed at Lin En. After being blocked by the neutron shield, their energy decayed to less than 1% and no longer posed a big threat. What a terrible power! Lin En muttered to himself. His expression was extremely solemn. This is not only about the quantum tide, but also about the light of destruction just now. It is definitely not something that a medium-level divine power can do. It is very likely that it comes from the power of the Lord God. After a round of destructive light bombarded, the polymer did not stop at all, and flew towards Lin En against the impact of the quantum tide. The volume further expanded, and the diameter of the wingspan even exceeded 1 kilometer. And the speed reached a point close to the speed of light. The speed of light is the upper limit of speed in the three-dimensional universe, But it is not enough at the high-dimensional level. Just before the polymer was approaching, Lin En's body suddenly flashed, and suddenly disappeared from the spot when it was penetrated by the flying wings. When it reappeared, it had already reached tens of thousands of kilometers away. This is exactly the dimension jump, copied from the main ship of the geometry star. This technology can enable a warship as large as a city to achieve teleportation. The disadvantages are that there are problems such as excessive energy loss, distance limitation, and inability to accurately locate. Lin En's control and cognition of dimensions are also stronger than that of the geometry civilization, so he can freely control the position of teleportation, but even so, he cannot use it frequently, because before performing the dimension jump, it takes 1 second to confirm the safe coordinates. In this war of gods that moves at the speed of light and is calculated in milliseconds, once a flaw is caught, even 1 second is enough to be fatal. However, the first use was naturally beyond the expectations of the god of life and creation. Although he noticed the fluctuations in time and space, Lin En had already arrived less than a kilometer behind him before he stopped it. After the first round of confrontation, Lin En had already realized that the strange polymer was most likely related to the Lord God, and it was definitely not something he could easily deal with, so it would be better to deal with its controller first. Augur obviously also noticed Lin En's murderous intention, and understood that he could not have the slightest chance of winning if he fought alone. Without any hesitation or any idea of resistance, his whole body directly split open and split into hundreds of pieces and fled in all directions. At this moment, Lin En had already attracted the microparticles existing in the quantum sea, and a light more dazzling than a solar flare lit up in the void of high-dimensional space, and nearly 99% of the split bodies were destroyed in this blow. However, the remaining dozen bodies split again and escaped into the deeper part of the quantum sea. The life and creation priest may not have any strengths in combat, but his survivability is extremely strong. Before his divine power is completely exhausted, he is definitely one of the most difficult gods to kill. Lin En had no chance to chase him a second time, because in less than 0.1 seconds, the polymer composed of countless eyes had already come to kill him again. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 648, The God of Life and Creation. White feathers continued to fall from the sky, gorgeous and beautiful but revealing a strong murderous intent. Lin En did not dare to let these seemingly holy feathers get close to his body, let alone neglect them. He clenched his palm lightly, and a large amount of divine power was transformed into neutrons and anti-electrons. Then a bright beam of light shot out from his palm, and in an instant it penetrated the huge body of the polymer. This is the antimatter sword. From the moment this powerful divine art was developed, it was Lin En's only choice for attacking. Even though his strength has increased a lot now, he no longer regards it as a means of bottoming out, but can also be used as a good offensive divine art. The hilt of the sword, which was made of neutrons and anti-electrons, revealed its power the moment it pierced into the body of the polymer god. The magnetic field that bound the energy disappeared instantly, and the energy generated by the annihilation of positive and negative matter exploded directly from the inside. The huge body of the polymer expanded again, but this time it was forced. The blood pupils that were forcibly stuck together by the divine power exploded one after another under the impact of the energy of the annihilation of positive and negative matter. After a slash, nearly 1/3 of the huge polymer body was destroyed, but such a serious injury did not cause much impact, but only slightly blocked the opponent's steps, and this part of the damaged body was still repairing at a very fast speed. It seems that the core that supports the power must be destroyed. Lin En thought to himself that the god of life and creation had just shown him that thing, which was an eye the size of a human head, but he didn't know where it was hidden in the body. But even if he knew, it would not be easy to ensure that he could hit a human head-sized, fast-moving object with the strongest force on a cosmic scale, or should we destroy it with a large-scale offensive? Lin En made a decision immediately. It seems that he can only try that one. A complex thought flashed through his mind. Now that he was still in the battle, Lin En did not dare to be too distracted. He once again blocked the flying light of destruction with the neutron shield. Then, 8 magic incarnations appeared beside Lin En. 4 of them took action at the first time, trying to restrain the polymer's actions with the electromagnetic field. The quantum sea is located in the high-dimensional space of the universe. There are many electrons inside. Under the control of the electromagnetic priesthood, an electromagnetic cage was quickly formed around the polymer. The other 4 incarnations also took action at the same time. Hundreds of neutron cannons with a diameter of about 1 mm bombarded the polymer at sublight speed. At this moment, the polymer made up of countless pairs of eyes was trapped in the electromagnetic cage. The magnetic field that was invisible to the naked eye was like a silk thread, trapping it firmly. But as the damaged body was repaired, such restraints became weak. The polymer suddenly spread its wings, and the surrounding space was constantly surging like ripples. The restraint of the magnetic field was broken in an instant, and the neutron cannons that were flying towards it also shifted away. The polymer did not stop at all. It had already sensed a strong sense of crisis. Lin En's body was also condensing a neutron group, which was even more than 1,000 times larger than the hundreds of neutron cannons combined. Its power can be imagined. The polymer naturally would not let Lin En slowly cast the spell. The wings spread again, and the surrounding space showed obvious distortion. The speed also increased several times in this moment, moving forward at nearly twice the speed of light, crossing a distance of tens of thousands of kilometers in just 0.02 seconds. 8 magic incarnations blocked the front together, but these incarnations with only one layer of power from the body could not play a big role at all, and were blocked by the flash of the light of destruction in a moment. However, when a round of annihilation light destroyed these magical incarnations, Lin En had already disappeared from the spot, and only a small ball with a diameter of about 10 centimeters remained in the endless void. In the ferocious blood pupils of the polymer, hundreds of thousands of annihilation lights lit up again, trying to destroy it directly. The vast amount of annihilation light hit the target accurately without exception, but the threat was not lifted, and the sense of crisis was even stronger than before. Because the annihilation light was not so accurate, many were even fired in other directions to block the entire space, but at this moment they hit the target accurately, or were sucked in. The small ball with a diameter of about 10 centimeters collapsed before the attack arrived, turned into a singularity, and began to frantically absorb all the surrounding matter and energy. Obviously, this is a micro black hole. Since it is not easy to capture enough matter in the quantum sea, the mass that constitutes the core of the black hole is directly converted from magic power, which consumes nearly half of Lin En's divine power. As for the neutron cannon fired before, it was just a cover, just to make the opponent think that his means of attack was long-range projection, but in fact it was to attract the opponent to step in. This strategy was undoubtedly successful. Although the polymer quickly realized that something was wrong, it was already within the Schwarzschild radius of this micro-black hole, and even less than a kilometer away from the core. The huge and holy wings were torn to pieces by the powerful gravity, and the blood-red pupils piled on the periphery were also forcibly stripped off. Even the surrounding quantum tides could not avoid the attraction of the black hole, and continued to pour into the singularity like a whirlpool. 1 millisecond after the collapse began, Lin En's body appeared 30,000 kilometers away. Just now, he used dimension jump again to escape from that area before the black hole was completed. Visually watching the polymer being torn into pieces and rolled into the black hole, Lin En did not relax his vigilance. He soon noticed that a strange substance was flying out of the quantum tide of the black hole that was constantly pouring in. If it were not for the extremely obvious ripples in space and time caused by it, it would probably be difficult to notice it. What a pity! Lin En sighed with regret, but he was not surprised. After all, this micro-black hole is just a product of an experiment, and its mass is very limited. Moreover, the other party has already demonstrated the ability to overcome the attraction of a black hole. Fortunately, after giving up such a large energy body, the loss is naturally not small. The blood pupil that escaped the capture range of the black hole has become extremely dim. Since it can't be solved in one blow, let's make up for it again. Lin En stretched out his hand, and a strong electromagnetic force condensed in his palm. Please stop. Great God from another world, I think we should have a good talk. A voice suddenly sounded in Lin En's mind. The God of life and creation, Augur, actually took the lead in grasping the main artifact. Chapter 649, Augur's Sincerity and the Rebellious God. Augur, who got the main artifact first, did not let Lin En stop his actions. The electrons wandering in the quantum sea were mobilized. The brief rounds of fighting just now had allowed him to test the limits of the polymer's power. Although this thing is powerful, it is not invincible. The powerful electromagnetic field spreading throughout the entire area made the God of life and creation no longer calm, and he hurriedly spoke again. There is a reason for this. Please forgive my offense just now. This is my sincerity. As the voice fell, the God of life and creation opened his right hand, holding the blood pupil that had become fragmented. Without waiting for Lin En to ask, Augur took the initiative to explain. This artifact belongs to the Lord God Maragus, and contains his will. Before destroying it, I cannot do anything out of line, otherwise I will be monitored or even killed. Augur said half-truthfully. Lord God Maragus naturally could not directly monitor him, but he did suspect that the other party had done something to this main artifact, so he did not reveal his true intentions when they first met. Otherwise he would be killed by the main artifact that was protecting him. However, Lin En did not care, as if he did not hear the words of the God of life and creation. In just a few seconds, a more solid electromagnetic cage had been formed, trapping the other party in it. Lin En's indifferent attitude made Augur's face look very ugly. He gritted his teeth and continued to speak. I have a lot of information about the main world. The three main gods have now united. Without my help, it won't be long before they will invade this world again. It is impossible for you to fight them with your own strength. Augur spoke very quickly, but the electromagnetic cages shrank smaller and smaller, and many of them shrank to a diameter of 10 meters. Seeing that Lin En ignored him, Augur was also a little surprised and angry. He hesitated for a while whether to resist or not, but finally held back because he knew that he had no chance of winning. Lin En had no intention of killing him. After restricting the opponent's ability to move, he began to block and strip the nearby space, and put Augur and the area of more than 10 meters in radius into a four-dimensional bottle. Seeing that the God of life and creation did not resist throughout the whole process, Lin En believed that the so-called main artifact should have been destroyed. However, Lin En still did not intend to communicate with Augur. He decided to leave him alone for a while before slowly considering his words. Now he has more troublesome things to deal with. Lin En turned his head and looked around. The protective shield formed by the outer element number 7 was severely damaged. The gap created by the light of destruction became larger under the impact of the quantum tide, and the aftermath of the battle inevitably affected it. When Lin En returned to the universe and took back all the elements number 7, he found that the mass was reduced by 1/3 compared to before, and the loss was not small. Seeing Lin En return, Herve and others who were anxiously waiting outside breathed a sigh of relief. Just now, Lin En moved the battlefield to the quantum sea, and they had no way to intervene, let alone know what the battle was like. It seems that the battle went well. Did the main world only send this god here? Seeing that Lin En did not seem to be injured, Vittorio's tone was also a little relaxed. For the time being, there should be only this one. Lin En nodded, and after pondering for a moment, he told about the battle and communication with Augur just now. A rebellious god? Herve and others frowned. This seemed a bit strange to them, not to mention that this god was holding the artifact given by the main god in his hand, and he should have come with some kind of mission. Could it be that those gods want to play a trick of surrender? Anthony guessed. The believers and divine domains of these gods are all in the main world. Now suddenly saying that they want to betray is extremely unreliable, so it is very likely that the other party set up a trap to destroy a so-called main artifact to gain their trust. It's possible that they are pretending to surrender, but we can't completely rule out the possibility that they are well-intentioned. Aurora reminded, there are so many gods in the main world, and there will always be conflicts in beliefs, priesthood, and territorial disputes, so it is unlikely that they are united. Moreover, they showed their strength to counter the main world in the last battle, so it is normal for some speculators to appear. Let's leave him alone for a while, and then ask him later and we'll know. Lin En was not prepared to argue about this issue for too long, and then turned to ask Herve and others whether the geometry civilization had made any moves during this period. Herve explained, 2 minutes ago, they did send a communication, asking if anything happened here. Dozens of fleets have been gathering outside the black hole for several days. With the technology of geometry civilization, it is naturally impossible for them not to know. In fact, the other party has been paying attention to the situation here, and it is likely that they want to see how they will deal with this black hole that appeared within 0.1 light-years of the galaxy. What should we answer now? Herve asked. They had just discussed and prepared to use the black hole experiment as an excuse. No matter how the other party asked, they would say that it was a secret experiment and it was inconvenient to disclose it. That's fine. Lin En nodded and agreed. The more you talk, the more mistakes you make. The less you talk, the fewer mistakes you make. Let the other party figure out the rest. In order to prevent gods from sneaking into this universe through the space-time wormhole again, after the threat was lifted, dozens of fleets did not evacuate, but patrolled nearby. In addition, Lin En also sent a magic incarnation to stay there to avoid some emergencies. The geometry civilization, just as they thought, gave up asking openly after hearing that the magic empire was conducting experiments near the black hole, and instead increased secret surveillance. The compensation of 1,300 tons of element 7 was also delivered within a week, which shows that the limited production volume mentioned by the geometry civilization before was just empty talk. Lin En also handed over a magic block of 10 kilograms to Money as promised, and allowed him to open a wormhole in the planet for a short time to send things directly to the mother planet. On the other side, the scientific researchers of the geometry civilization had already prepared for the preliminary experiments. They cut the block with a diameter of less than 1 centimeter into thousands of pieces and began preliminary research eagerly. They had all read the information that Money had sent back before. If it weren't for the thing right in front of them, no one would have dared to believe that such a magical and even somewhat counterintuitive energy source actually existed. Chapter 650, Magical Derivative Experiment and Quantized Data Consciousness. The 67th experiment of magic power derivation and its influence and transformation on organisms begins. In the biological transformation and genetic engineering laboratory of the mother world, a large number of scientific researchers with extremely high attainments in biology and energetics gathered here, staring at the hundreds of carbon-based organisms trapped in the energy shield. The number of experimental subjects is undoubtedly a little scarce, but there is nothing they can do about it. The specimens they are allocated are very limited, only 0.5 kilograms, which is not enough even if converted into pure energy, and it is expected that they will not receive the second batch of magic power support for a long time. In order to obtain this substance, the leaders of the geometric civilization have spent a lot of money and paid a full 1,000 tons of element 7, which is equivalent to the amount of mining and transformation for a full 200 years. If they had not found a new mineral source in a galaxy they conquered more than 10 years ago, the leaders would probably not be willing to make such a generous payment. Fortunately, Money secretly sent back a large number of research reports obtained on Planet 1700 in batches, which saved them from many basic experiments and they only needed to continue their research according to this idea. The experiment conducted this time was naturally the most important magic derivative experiment. Only by cracking the magic manufacturing method first can we conduct subsequent research. Experimental subjects 09 and 012 have limb mutation reactions, and half of the body cells are eroded by magic. Experimental subjects 027 and 031 have 3 times the amount of magic infusion, severe stress reaction, and need emergency treatment. Experimental subjects 041 and 052 have abnormally active brain waves, and the basic elements in the protective shield have moved in a way that does not conform to the laws of mechanics. It is recommended to conduct more in-depth testing. Hundreds of experiments were carried out almost simultaneously, and these carbon-based creatures injected with magic soon showed different degrees of changes. For example, the strength of the body of experimental subject 047 has increased several times compared to before, even exceeding the limit of carbon-based creatures. Two carbon-based creatures that survived the injection of 10 times the magic even showed that part of their bodies were energized, which greatly excited the group of geometric stars. However, the backlash caused by such direct magic injection was also extremely serious. 90% of the hundreds of experimental subjects suffered cellular damage. Their bodies could not withstand such a huge energy infusion. More than 10 experimental subjects who received more than 5 times the magic injection were already dying in just a few atomic fractions. Fortunately, the biological transformation technology of the geometric civilization is very powerful. These incurable diseases in the eyes of planetary civilizations are a piece of cake under the treatment of atomic-level biological transformation instruments. In the end, all the experimental subjects survived and completed the initial biological transformation. The preliminary conclusion can be determined. The data provided by Money in the report is very accurate. Magic can indeed transform carbon-based organisms into energy organisms. In addition, after killing some of the transformed organisms, the total amount of magic we detected did not increase but decreased by a quarter. A spire-shaped scientific researcher summarized. Ita, a dimension and space-time engineer, carefully reviewed the reports of each experiment. With the assistance of atomic-level detection instruments, the changes inside these organisms were recorded in detail. However, the conclusion he reached surprised him. The total amount of magic power has not increased but decreased. Ida was confused, because according to the information given by Money, the derivation of magic power should be related to the death of living beings. Could it be that the information was wrong? Ida did not draw a conclusion easily, and immediately asked people to use quantum observation instruments to conduct a more detailed inspection of the bodies of these creatures. After a lot of trouble, things were just as he expected. The magic power did not disappear out of thin air, but was transformed. The sudden physical alienation and cell-level transformation of those experimental subjects all require energy consumption. Of course, if this alone could not be hidden from their detection, what is more important is that while the magic power invaded the body cells and provided them with energy for division, it directly disguised and replaced some of the alienated limb cells, and also hid from their rough detection. The information conveyed by Money stated that magic power, a strange energy, can affect any element, but now they have discovered another more amazing fact, that is, magic power can be easily transformed into other substances. Quick! Report this news, Ita said excitedly. With the preliminary research results, it means that they can get more magic samples. But before Ita could report, a piece of news came first. Another laboratory, while conducting magic research, created a strange creature that existed in the form of soul, and detected a large amount of magic reaction from this thing. Ita took the report and looked at it for a few times, and said thoughtfully, "This is very similar to quantized data consciousness." The so-called quantized data consciousness is a technology of geometric civilization, which can upload one's own memory to the optical brain. According to the developer's idea, it is used in conjunction with energy transformation technology, which can achieve immortality in a certain sense. However, this technology was shelved directly due to its high difficulty and internal controversy. Now it seems that the growth and decline of magic power may be related to the consciousness of intelligent creatures. Ida soon realized this and hurriedly asked someone to get another batch of experimental subjects. He needed to confirm his guess. The preliminary research on magic power lasted for more than a month. With the unreserved technical support, Ida once again made a major breakthrough. He found a way to transform the soul into magic power. What made Ida a little dissatisfied was that the whole conversion process would inevitably cause some losses, and the loss rate was about 25%. According to some energetics researchers, these lost magic powers entered the high-dimensional world in a quantum state when they were converted into microscopic particles, thus escaping their control. Such a phenomenon had been encountered in the past when capturing other microscopic particles, but the current research on dimensions by the geometric civilization is still in its infancy, and there is no way to intercept it. It seems that we can only use more primitive methods, Ida said helplessly. But it's normal to think about it. Even the Magic Empire, which is far superior to them in dimensional technology, needs to rely on the method of planetary ranches to realize the derivation of magic power. They'd better not be too ambitious. Anyway, there are many galaxies under the rule of the geometric civilization, and it is easy to set aside 100 or 80 as planetary ranches. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.